Okay, thank you. Thank you, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I want to welcome you to today's lecture, which is brought to you by the Energy Training Center and the Oil and Gas Trainers Association of Nigeria. So today the theme of the lecture is Nigeria's energy sector, a review of the decade of gas and the PIA, that's the Petroleum Industry Act impacts, economic and sustainability perspective. So as many of us know, gas operations can be quite complex, and the sector is unique as the upstream, midstream, and downstream gas operations are usually considered, and contracts for supply of gas to the consumers are even concluded before infrastructure financing can be secured. Usually, this gas would be utilized for power generation, as power is the biggest user of gas. However, in Nigeria, we've been plagued by the inability to properly maximize the utility in gas under our previous legal regimes, and the Petroleum Industry Act attempts to correct this problem. Now, the PIA was enacted to provide the legal, governance, regulatory, and the physical framework for the Nigerian petroleum industry, the development of the host communities, and for other related matters. It sets out to fill the gap which was identified in the previous legal regimes on gas operations, such as the ineffectiveness of regulations surrounding gas flaring and its environmental impact. For instance, under the PIA, gas flaring is basically banned, and the Act provides for an environmental remediation fund. But unfortunately, these laudable introductions are being made at a time when sustainable development is the front burner conversation in the international community. And there have been several agreements which have been reached, like the Paris Agreement, to protect the environment and reduce the global carbon levels. Now, this means that major countries and funders are advocating defunding fossil fuel projects, which includes gas projects in favor of renewable energy. So this already shows the clear dichotomy between Nigeria's drive for an efficient gas sector, which the PIA sets out to achieve, the obvious energy deficit we have in Nigeria, and the global conversation surrounding sustainable development. How all these realities will play out, I'm sure will be examined by our eminent panel. So with this background in mind, I am pleased to welcome you all and to welcome our power-packed panelists, who I am certain will do justice to this important topic. I will now hand over to my co-moderator, Mr. Afolabi Davidson, to introduce our host and the panelists. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kinyobo. That was Kinyobo Ekwadeye, who is the managing partner of Compost Mentis, my co-moderator. Once again, I'd like to welcome everyone to this lecture series. First, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping rules before I introduce the OGTAN president, who would be giving us an address. The first rule is that you're free to ask questions, and you can type those questions by using the Q&A icon that is available to you at the bottom of your screen. And feel free to direct your questions to any of the presenters. The questions will be treated at the end of all presentations. We will try to attempt all of the questions. However, if we run out of time, all unanswered questions will be treated and disseminated to all attendees. So for those of you just joining us, I want to welcome you again. It's my pleasure to introduce the OGTAN president, Mazi Sam Onyechi, who will give us his very brief address to set the ball rolling. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Kinyobo, and the Vice President of OGTAN, Afolabi Davidson. I welcome all our panelists to another trailing masterclass, another trailing lecture series of OGTAN. I want to welcome the entire participants to this masterclass, hosting a select group of experts, knowledgeable and highly experienced resource persons who have kindly volunteered to help the OGTAN membership and the entire industry understand in clearer terms how to navigate the new and beautiful bride of the industry. Gas, as a new bride, it's a new and virgin bride. There are challenges one must overcome to get the benefits of acquiring, as Nigerians would say, tialeda, of a fresh, brand new possession. So we are now speaking the language of gas. And whereas the clamor is for renewables in place of fossil fuels, the truth, as Engineer Simbi Wabote would say, is that there is no magic wand and there's no witch around to flip one type of energy automatically into another. And so the predictable outcome of the renewable energy transition is going to simply be a mix of several energy types across worlds and energy requirements for a very long time, with a gradual but definitely steady shift towards the zero carbon emission goal. In an extension of this reality, the Igbos will say that the sword tied to one's waist is what one uses to salute his fellow warrior. So for Nigeria, gas is the way to go for now, as we have this in huge stock that we may not be able to run out the reserves in the next 70 to 100 years. And obviously, gas especially, if not fled, has its environmental and climatic advantages over other fossil fuels. So gas is here with us, especially with the declared Decade of Gas program of the current administration of President Muhammadu Buhari, and with huge investments being poured into the gas value chain already. There is therefore no running away from the pros and cons that must accompany our new adventure into this energy source. There are opportunities that must be explored, definitely. New technologies that must be learned and understood. New hopes that must be sprung, and new and innovative ideas that must be explored. And indeed, new language that must be spoken. The beautiful language of gas. If one does not move with the times move on without one. And so OGTAN has partnered with one of our very own, a great intellectual center, Energy Training Center, to begin this journey of understanding the multitude of terminologies, technologies, opportunities, and risks that must be encountered, understood, and applied for positive gains from the new energy trust of our nation, especially against the impactful changes that the new industry law, the PIA, brings into all these novelties. So in this masterclass, we hope to find out if the PIA has inherent potentials to create the necessary framework to support the gas sector in meeting several long-term energy challenges of our nation, including power generation, domestic gas utilization and supplies, etc. This class will also review the impact of the PIA and its fate in the current energy environment, where the Western world, seemingly in opposition to our gas initiatives, are advocating the funding fossil fuel projects, including gas, as a result of the global energy transition to renewables. What this portends for Nigeria's economic future, as well as Africa's, will be discussed, as well as the opportunities for small, medium, and large-scale enterprises, the opportunities they should glean from these discourses, all with a view to empowering our members and the general industry. OGTAN and ETC have therefore partnered to bring you excellent and knowledgeable industry voices, including notable academia, to discuss this enthralling issue and enlighten our minds. On this note, I heartily welcome, in no particular order, our esteemed speakers. Engineer Justice O. Derefaka, our popular JOD, the darling of the industry, a man of vision and great intellect. Our Lady of Charm, exquisite beauty and brain combined, a Director of Corporate and Regulatory Affairs of ASOWEL, an esteemed OGTAN member company, Chariot Estate. Mr. George Itomi, Principal Managing Partner, George Itomi and Partners, a legal luminary to give us legal perspectives to the burning issue. Also speaking is Mr. Noble Shasuk, CEO, Eco City Projects Limited. And I can understand how mega these projects are. So these are an expert in projects, mega projects management. And last, but certainly not the least, from the Diaspora Academia, a lecturer and program leader from the University of Salford, UK, an authority in petroleum and gas engineering, Dr. Abubakar Abbas. Ladies and gentlemen, even though this is a virtual event, I think this retinue of excellence deserves a thundering applause. Can we give them a clap, please, as we welcome them and welcome all of you once again to OGTAN Q3 lecture series. Please relax and enjoy the highly educational session. Thank you for attending, and God bless you.
Thank you, Mr. President. The applause is sounding. I can hear the virtual claps going on. So it gives me great pleasure, without much further ado, to introduce our first speaker today, Mr. George Itomi, who is a distinguished transaction lawyer, regularly consulted by multinational companies and top government agencies. He has extensive experience in commercial transactions, spanning arbitration and other AGR methods. He's also experienced in aviation, building and construction, power, energy, and natural resources. He has represented clients on a variety of corporate and commercial matters, and has a special interest in the power sector, energy and natural resources field. Mr. Itomi's vast knowledge of the energy sector is drawn from his extensive engagements in transaction advisory on projects involving utilities, the government, regulatory agencies, and private projects. He's a regular facilitator at global business conferences and a regular guest on television news segments where he provides valuable insight and simplified understanding of strategic market developments in the sector. His contributions border on the legal, regulatory, and commercial aspects of the sector developments, including the tariff regimes of the power sector, commercial structures, regulatory directives, contractual arrangements, and consumer-related issues, particularly on the impact to stakeholders and consumers. May I present Mr. George Itomi.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I hope you can all hear me, just to be certain.
Yes, we can.
I want to add my voice to those of the previous speakers, especially the president of OGTAN, for inviting me, and indeed the other esteemed members of this panel, to look into what is the reality of our future as we begin our energy transition. I am aware that I have only 10 minutes, so I'm not going to go into great details about the provisions of the PIA with regard to this subject. But I'm just going to give an overview, and then you can take a more detailed look at these provisions, because I've set them out in this paper, so you can understand where I'm coming from. Now, by way of introduction, there is nothing to argue that gas is going to be the mainstay of this economy. It holds the key to the diversification of our economy, and the Honorable Minister of Petroleum Resources captured it very eloquently yesterday when he laid down the gauntlet about Nigeria's policy regarding energy transition. He clearly stated that it is not going to be a single pathway, and we must look at the options available to us today, even as we begin to look at renewables, which is the future of the world. And I think that's one of the most patriotic statements I've ever had from any of our ministers, because it's the reality of our situation, and we must take the bull by the horn and do what we need to do. Now, if it's any comfort, I have been practicing for quite a long time, about 40 years. And during this period, I saw the how Nigeria broke the banking monopoly by government, how we did telecoms, aviation, and in fact, currently a member of the board of EcoDisco. And in fact, we leave this gas to power problem. But I will want to assure every one of you that at no point did it appear easy, or was it easy for Nigeria to transit from one mode of living to the other. Change always meets with resistance. And I still remember, even in the banking sector in those days, the major banks, especially the merchant banks, were controlled by foreign banks. And even though they had Nigerian surrogates as MDs and co, when the federal government wanted to implement a plan for indigenous participation and eventual takeover of the sector, they even got Nigerian MDs to send memos to the Federal Ministry of Finance at the time as to why it was premature for Nigerians to take over. But the will of the government at the time was that Nigerians could do it and they would do it. So what they simply did was cleared those Nigerians who allowed themselves to be made stooges for this purpose and simply dug out a much younger breed. And it is not an accident that Nigerians have driven the growth in the banking industry to the point where today we are one of the most advanced countries when it comes to banking and financial services. Today we control our destiny. Same thing happened with telecoms. Now, in the case of telecoms, and I'm going to draw on telecoms because the PIA has to mirror what happened with the telecom sector. Again, we were involved with the setting up the legal and regulatory framework for the power, for the telecoms industry. And at that time, the behemoth that bestrode the telecom space was NITEL. And so much so that the law was actually named the NITEL Act. But in preparing ourselves for privatization, we were participated in the drafting of what is today called the Telecoms Act. And one of the most major changes we introduced was removing the powers of the minister to do spectrum and license allocations, which was the major reason telecoms was so sought after. We did that. There was a political way to drive it through. And it's not an accident that with the proper legal and regulatory framework that put the National Communications Commission, NCC, at the heart of these reforms, we're seeing investments in their droves, notwithstanding the fact that Nigeria did not possess the technology for telecoms. But in the course of time, with the path opened by legislation and legal and regulatory framework, the technology came, and Nigerians today control that sector. So I foresee a similar thing happening with the PIA. Sadly, the PIA has taken nearly 20 years to do. We should have done it much long ago, much earlier than now. But as the saying goes, I mean, the best time to do something was 20 years ago. The next best time is today. So we have the PIA. And the PIA, hopefully, will unlock this huge potential that we have. I'm going to concentrate on the gas sector, and that's because fossil fuels are not really going to be going out of fashion, but gas is a different ballgame. From my screen, you will see that Nigeria controls over 203 trillion cubic feet of gas reserves. And yet, these gas reserves only account for a maximum of 8% of our primary energy source in Nigeria. And that's a shame. That's one reason why we must work it out. So you will find provisions in the PIA, and I've referred it to some of them, section 110, and various subsections, which have created provisions to unlock this. But the one particular one I want to refer you to is the provision on pricing, because the major difference between gas pricing and the market is that the major users of gas is the power sector. And between the provision of the power sector, gas, which is a feedstock, the pricing at that end impacts on the tariffs. And because the tariff is usually so heavily political, there tends to be interference. And what naturally should allow a willing buyer, willing seller, or market determined prices has generally not happened in Nigeria. And we've therefore had a situation where there's been a mismatch between the cost of producing power and the price at which it's been sold. And that gap has created a major distortion and therefore a major disincentive to the sort of investments that's required to move the power sector forward. And yet we all agree that if this economy is going to be diversified, it's going to come from the power sector. And you cannot improve on the power sector without dealing with the gas. Sadly, the PIA, and I've just saw it on the screen now, you will see the relationship between what as it stands today, between gas and the power value chain. And if you just look at how the arrows go, you see this interplay between the need for the exploration and exploitation of our gas reserves to energize the power sector. And you will see where there are dislocations as you go across, including what we all know today is energy theft and so many different things. But the key thing here in this diagram is that there's a mismatch between the cost of the gas and then the tariffs that should be charged to enable the entire value chain to be liquid. It is the illiquidity of the power sector that is the bane. But how has the PIA addressed it? Sadly, the PIA has not really addressed the issue the way I would love for it to address it. And that is because the PIA, under the regulatory framework provided, still allows for a measure of price fixing by the regulator. And even though in the past, these prices were tended to be static, the PIA now says it should be done annually. And that's because the policy is looking at a gradual phasing from this uncompetitive mode towards market determined prices. As you can see, it has political imprint all over it. You don't want the sort of tariff shocks that could lead to you losing votes. You understand what's going on. But we all know that if you look at power and to measure economic growth, some numbers are you can't run away from some numbers. The Millennium Development Goals tell us that if you want to sustain a certain level of growth towards economic freedom, you must produce 1,000 megawatts of power per 1 million of a population. In that case, ideally, Nigeria should be looking at 200,000 megawatts for its 200 million population. South Africa, for example.
Mr. Itomi, kindly turn on your video, sir.
Turn on or off?
On, so we can see you.
Oh, look at that.
Thank
just
you.
1 second. Oh, okay. All right. Okay, well, can you still see my screen though? All right. Is that okay?
We can see your screen now. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so South Africa has a population of 55 million. They produce 45,000 megawatts, almost pari passu. But in Nigeria, we're talking about 4,000 megawatts, 5,000 megawatts. So you can see how far back, as an index of development, we are far away from where we should be. So that is why, for me, it's a no-brainer that we must put everything in our powers to ensure that we move the needle from where we are today. Any increment from 5 to 10 to 20 to 30 translates to a mega revolution in economic activities in the country. That's why I said, just think about it. We're at 4,000 and South Africa is 45,000. So you can imagine how much of a beehive of economic activities that's generating for them. And yet it's still not enough for their purposes. So for us, the journey has just begun and we must do it. The biggest constraint today, as I told you, is that for every major investment you make in the power sector, it must reflect in the tariffs, because that's the only way you get your returns. Otherwise, government will be forced to subsidize. And we know that subsidy regimes always create problems. There will always be arbitraging, there will eventually be abuse, and so forth and so on. So pretty much like the telecoms industry, you bring in a lot of money, you take out a lot of money. And for many consumers, if they see the product, they will pay for it. And I am telling you, I am involved in the power sector. And I know that in spite of the hue and cry when tariff increases occur, the major problem with consumers is that when these your tariffs increase, we don't see commensurate service. So the answer lies in providing that service, which means we must look to the PIA to unlock the huge in the power sector. And I've referred you to so many sections of the PIA that deal with this particular thing. I've talked about the price control, which hopefully will be there temporarily to bridge or to cushion any tariff shocks that will arise from freeing up the entire sector. Legislations or laws are made to be amended, and at the right time, once by policy we begin to achieve some degree of parity, the necessary amendments will be made. But even ahead of major legislative amendments, there's room for regulatory control of improvement in the sector. So you don't necessarily have to have full legislative changes before the regulator can do what needs to be done to advance the sector. Now, I've talked about the energy I've talked about 2050, the demand for oil will decline, net zero. We've had all those things. So we have a finite box in which we can make the changes that we need to be made. And what do all these things call for? It calls for patriotism. It calls for industry. We just need to unleash the genius in the Nigerian. And if you ask me, I think at this point we should begin to lean more and more on our indigenous petroleum producers to provide the goals for us. Because whilst the West, on account of funding restrictions, will begin to move away from fossil fuels, I just believe that the gap that will be created must be filled by indigenous participants. The question would be, do they have the funding? Do they have the technology? Through regional, through international bilateral arrangements, because not everybody is on the same boat with regard to energy transition. We can still look to advanced countries that share the same concerns with us regarding energy transition and team up with them. Oil, gas will become just another source of energy, maybe not as central, maybe it become one of those other sources, pretty much the way coal has become. Coal has not been outlawed in many major coal producing countries. And I see that if we begin to look more and more inward, the domestic utilization of our gas can form the mainstay of this economy. So once gas is available, then we can crank this economy, run it full steam, and we can begin to do a lot of inward trading within Nigeria, within the African Continental Free Trade Zone, and we're a dominant economy in Africa. So what we really need to do really is to win ourselves this consumer mentality that we have, this that's made everyone of us lazy, that has made every one of us not look at how we can unleash that genius in us. But if it is any hope the success with banking and telecom should make us believe that we can also do the same thing for the gas sector. I was at a conference recently in Senegal, where Senegal too, you know, we have all through the Gulf of Guinea now, company with regard to the production of oil and gas. And they too were discussing the future of their oil and gas. I had the opportunity to speak. And I said, we must speak like African brothers. The interests of the West does not correspond with our interests with regard to the future of oil and gas. So if you depend on them wholesale for that future, your growth will be limited. But if we begin to talk amongst ourselves the more and produce our gas as opposed to allow gas go the same way oil did, where we produce the raw materials and then use the same money received from that to import more expensive refined products, then we'll be missing the mark. So the idea, therefore, is to look inward and begin to diversify our economies. So the decade of gas, which we've talked about, I think should be for us the beginning of most of the good things that can come. And who says that you cannot get cleaner fuel, even with gas? Who says you cannot do that? I believe it can be done. And going forward, I've just listed out the number of things that I think we should be looking at, and then we can draw a lot of examples from countries with whom we share the same economic index only about 30, 40 years ago, who somehow have managed to take their destinies into their own hands. India, Singapore, Thailand, and all that. And for us, if we begin to redirect our politics to support economic growth, I think we will get there. Still about going forward, we really must begin to look at how our gas infrastructure can be built to support the power sector. If we do that, the tariffs, it will reflect in the tariffs, I agree, but I know that between consumer control of power consumption with the attendant benefit of constant and reliable, it's not just power, but clean, reliable power, I think a lot of that I find will be minimized. So to conclude, I'll say that the recommendations for the alignment of gas to power should be implemented. Incidentally, the gas flare regime based on the gas flare commercialization program, incidentally, which we're involved with, has kicked off. I don't understand why somehow there's a break in that, but that should happen. Because if you're going to provide for penalties in the PIA for gas flaring, you must give the necessary economic base for the gas that's been, you are saying should not be flared, to be commercialized. That program has started, but I think it should be given a bit more vigor. Incidentally, Justice, who is the guru in this matter, I'm sure will address it. So I want to thank you all for inviting me, and I hope my co-speakers can take things up from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we did very well. My co-moderator, Kinyovo, will take up the next introduction. Kinyovo, over to you.
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Itomi, for your insights on this topic. We would like to invite our next speaker, Engineer Justice Dere Feka. Engineer Justice is unarguably a rising star of the energy industry in Nigeria. His other portfolio of great impact include, he's the chairman, Capacity Building Development Subcommittee, National Gas Expansion Program, Program Nigerian Gas Flare Commercialization Program. He's also the program manager, Autogas Subcommittee, Nigerian Gas Expansion Program of the Ministry of Petroleum Resources. And then prior to his role at the ministry, Engineer Justice managed health, safety, and environment for all pipeline assets for the Shell Petroleum Development Company. He was also with Shell Nigeria Exploration and Production Company, SNEPCO, as the head environment and social performance. In his role, he managed critical non-technical risk issues. He also provided regulatory compliance and environmental expertise to SNEPCO's deep water project. Engineer Justice is also a scholar, and he's pursuing his career in the industry with great vigor and professional readiness. He's a marine engineer graduate from the River State University in Port Harcourt. He also holds a master's degree in environmental management from the University of Lagos and a second master's degree in sustainable leadership from the University of Cambridge, UK. He's also a doctoral research scholar and will be rounding off his thesis at the University of Bradford, UK. His doctoral thesis is on aligning corporate governance strategy with sustainability in the petroleum industry in Nigeria. We're very glad to have you, Engineer Justice. Welcome to this program.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you for that very, very big introduction. It's as if I'm going to get a new job. So thank you. Firstly, I want to thank the leadership of OGTAN for giving me the opportunity to speak with your very large audience regarding today's online webinar series. Let me just share my screen like my mentor, someone I've respected so much in the industry, even while I was in the university. And Mr. President, Mazis Sam, please next time, first of all, introduce the elders before me, because I don't have another job right now. Uncle George Itomi was somebody I respect right from my university days.
Thank you.
Until I get to meet him 2-3 years ago, you won't believe it. And then after such big names like George Itomi, I believe in Beijing conference, introduce the ladies. The only lady first before me and the others.
Thank you for your insights. I think
yes,
we already apologized that it was a flow of the spirit. It was done in no particular order of importance. So pardon us. Thank you. And you're welcome to the program. It's always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, sir. So without further ado, I will quickly go straight to my presentation. I haven't seen my friend, Norbert, but I'm sure I think it's online. So very quickly, I will speak to the team, the Nigerian energy sector, review of the decade of gas, and of course, the PIA, its impact from an economic and of course, from a sustainability perspective. So as a government, we've had a series of policies and initiatives. And of course, there was a mandate to run the oil and gas sector. Now, as we all know, permit me to just go up. This technology that I thought I knew is trying to embarrass me here. Okay. Set. All right, so this is basically an overview of the Nigerian energy sector. I will skip some slides, listening to my big uncle, Uncle Itomi, so because he has spoken to some of them. But again, for those of us listening, our current gas reserve as at the middle of this year is 206.53 trillion cubic feet of gas, with an upside potential of 600 TCF of gas. And then we have a projection to 210 TCF of gas by 2025, and then 220 TCF by 2030. And these are targets that the Department of Petroleum Resources has decided to set for themselves. But again, because this industry serves as a catalyst for the development of other sectors of the economy through the provision of raw materials and of course end products such as feedstocks, chemical products, power supply, gasoline, to other sectors such as agriculture, manufacturing, pharmaceuticals, and the transportation industries, it is key to our nation development, and which is why we cannot gloss over it. So again, for those of us that do not have the basic knowledge of the ecosystem within the oil and gas sector, we have the upstream, we have the midstream, and of course we have the downstream. So this just gives you an overview of the schematics of the upstream, midstream, downstream sector. So again, what I was speaking to, I will try to do a limitation on the upstream, but I'll touch it. But the key part with respect to the PIA, which that has been a lacuna, is the midstream and that sector, and again, how it straddles and connect with the downstream sector, which of course has a lot to do with revenue and of course job creation. So some leadership quotes. Mr. President has rightly mentioned that we intend to seize the opportunity to utilize our abundant gas resources, and this is the major objective of his administration, to transform Nigeria into an industrialized nation with gas playing a major role. So for those of us that haven't read the national gas policy and of course the national petroleum policy, I will advise you to take a sneak peek and have an understanding where most of the provisions in the PI 2021 came from. And then Uncle George mentioned yesterday, my boss, His Excellency Chief Timothy Priscilla, Minister for State Petroleum Resources, did mention at the CEPLAT Energy Summit that we reject the concept of single pathway to the energy transition. And for us, that is the best way to go, because there are multiple pathways to the energy transition, and we must, of course, address that. And particularly for African countries, we need to utilize our abundant natural resources to develop our continent, our country, and of course take a large chunk of our people out of energy poverty. So this gives you a sneak peek of the national petroleum policy, and this is a one-pager of the national gas policy 2017. So basically, it talks about developing gas resources, building gas market, and in particular, as it pertains to OGTAN's role in this space, is developing national human resources in terms of building institutional capacity, building Nigerian content and implementing Nigerian content, and of course, developing the skill set that the teaming Nigerian youths, and of course, those that are equally working to reskill and upskill the skill set. Again, having taking into consideration the digital age, and of course, as occasioned by the fourth industrial revolution. I'll speak to that in subsequent slides, and I will deviate a little from the theme of my presentation and speak to the big role OGTAN need to play in this gas space, in the decade of gas, in the national gas policy, and of course in the PI. The reason is this: whilst we're traversing, or we're trying to transit to using gas as a bridging fuel, that is capacity deficit in the country. And I recall Mr. President of OGTAN and his leadership, when they met with the Honorable Minister of State, he did mention that they have a role to play and they are key stakeholders to training the workforce that will be needed to have those roles in the oil and gas sector, having in mind the digitalization of the oil and gas sector, which is very, very key. So this gives you an overview of my boss's task and target. And like we say in the oil and gas sector, if your boss has 7 to 8 or 9 tasks and targets, you, the subordinate, will be ×3 of what he has. So that's what we do, and that's how we run it. So number 2 is the gas flare commercialization, which has been transited to DPRO to implement as the implementing agency in the Ministry of Petroleum Resources. And of course, number 5, which the Honorable Minister has ticked. Almost all of these have been ticked by my boss, and of course, putting implementation framework in that regard. So overview, the history of Nigerian oil and gas sector. Our economy, like Uncle Itomi has mentioned, is driven majorly by oil business. And Nigeria as a nation has the 10th largest oil reserve in the world, and growing in oil reserve to 40 billion barrels within the next 3 years. Our gas resources, like I did mention, today is 206.5 trillion cubic feet of natural gas, a huge investment opportunity in power and of course in gas-based industry, it's key. So the above underscores the importance of the industry to Nigeria. So again, OGTAN wants us to discuss the energy sector. So let's take a look at the energy sector challenge. We have issue of energy poverty, which is a reality for billions every day. Globally, there are 796 in terms of population. It was 1 billion 2 years ago. Now it's around 700 something million. And Africa has half of that number. And in particular, the West African sub-region where we are has the highest, followed by the other parts of Africa. And then we equally have energy wasted through inefficient transmission on appliances. And I'm sure Uncle George will agree with me in that regard. Then there is the issue of carbon intensive energy usage, which is damaging our environment. Most of us, I believe, like me, want to live longer. And if we continue to pollute our environment, it's going to be a big problem for us. Of course, potentially changing our climate, which is one of the major challenge for our contemporary society. We equally have our cities becoming unbearable due to the pollution, and our homes are not much better with the way we cook and of course make our food, which is what the LPG penetration of the ministry is looking to address. Plus, urbanization is accelerating. And like Uncle George mentioned, today we are number 7 in terms of the most populous country in the world. By 2050, where there will be serious energy demand, you will see in subsequent slides, Nigeria will be the 3rd most populous country in the world alongside 4 other African countries. So which means there's going to be so much energy demand. And of course, another issue is deforestation, not forgetting gas flaring. We flare gas that will have hitherto used to generate power, convert same to what we call flare gas to market products, methanol, fertilizer. And in the process of gas flaring, you see my brothers and sisters and our mothers going to dry what they call in Warikokbogari food, what people will consume. And for those that are health conscious, health averse, you begin to understand why some people fall sick, because the particulates from the gas flare will be deposited on that foodstuff that people eat. So on a daily basis, gas flaring, the good and the bad, you can see where those women are spreading those foodstuff and they will go sell it. And people that will buy it will not know the source of the of how they dry those foodstuff for them to consume. And then little boys and girls running around, walking around those areas. So on a daily basis, in as much as we keep flaring gas, 24/7 light, and of course 24/7 pollution. Now we can do better by converting the over, as at today, 750, 780 million cups of gas we flare daily to generate electricity for this country. So the idea about the national Nigerian gas flare commercialization program is to move from the left picture you're seeing to the right picture for us to be in tune with the Sustainable Development Goals of the United 17 SDGs of the United Nations. So the world is changing very fast. Today, 7.6 billion, 2050, 9.7 billion. And Nigeria in 2050, like I did mention earlier, will be the 3rd most populous nation. And we need energy, and the energy demand will grow by 30%. We as a nation, we have energy poverty, and that, which is what the present administration of President Buhari is trying to address with the use of gas. So Africa is still in darkness. Nigeria in particular is still in darkness. And you can see from the BBC Pidgin English language that Nigeria is the 2nd worst country for electricity. And I'm sure Uncle George will want to get this slide after today to use it for his subsequent presentation, because this is the reality. And again, what government is trying to address. So in a nutshell, ladies and gentlemen, the Nigerian Gas Flare Commercialization Program, the National Gas Expansion Program, and the Decade of Gas Initiative all offer a unique opportunity, unlocking all gas molecules, which gives us a favorable combination of solutions to address our problems. So again, renewable energy is there, but renewable energy cannot provide all the energy sources that we will need. It provides only about 25%. So where would the remaining 75% come from? Which is why non-renewable energy, and in particular, oil and gas, and predominantly gas, will be the closest ally to renewables. And that takes us to what my boss, the minister, said yesterday at the CEPLAT summit. So why the energy discourse? Why is OGTAN interested for us to have this energy sector discussion? Basically, it ties to the UN 17 Sustainable Development Goal, and in particular, goal number 7, ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. And like the minister said yesterday, the PIA 2021 will undoubtedly support the global energy, alleviate energy poverty as envisioned in the UN's SDG number 7. So we are not just walking the talk. Decade of gas, year of gas 2020 wasn't a buzzword. Gas as a key enabler to our nation's socioeconomic diversification is not a buzzword, it's not a catchphrase. And the Decade of Gas initiative is something that will come to stay. But again, before we look at the energy industry, there are 4 mega trends shaping this industry. Number 1, technological and digital breakthroughs is very key, which again, I will speak to, and how the OGTAN leadership and association will come into play. Resource scarcity and climate change. The other one is demographic and social changes, and of course, shift in economic power and rapid urbanization, like you saw in previous pictures, and that people need to, we need to now begin to use new technology, and of course, new business models, and of course, not forgetting partnership. Now, the other bit I'd like to mention in terms of digitalization, creating opportunities across the energy value chain. This picture gives an overview of what the digitalization is doing in our industry. So overall, digital technology is a key enabler for the next generation of clean energy technology. OGTAN has a role to play. So my question is, with new energies and digitalization are reshaping the energy market, what is OGTAN doing in this digital space, taking into cognizance that the fourth industrial revolution has come to stay, and as a country, we need to do catch-up in terms of upskilling, reskilling, and of course, the training of our teaming youth and the workforce to do a catch-up and be at par with other parts of the world. So moving on, and for the educational and training institutions like OGTAN, now is the time to think bigger. So when you say think bigger, what is in it for OGTAN? Technology and digitalization are performance boosters, no doubt about it. So it requires a different structure and mindset to break through the existing vertical silos. Help is needed from OGTAN. So here's a real training for me, educational leadership challenge to OGTAN. Apart from the tools, it is essential for us to build up the capacity of staff people to combine deep domain skills with the ability to program, who can think end to end, who understand the full uncertainty spectrum, and of course, who know what makes a process efficient. And OGTAN, we believe, can they deliver this? I'll leave that to OGTAN to decide, and of course, for the audience to reach out to OGTAN. So how future ready is OGTAN? Because oil and gas companies are becoming future ready now, and we're not taking technology lightly. So again, this gives you an overview where OGTAN attention is needed in terms of training, designing your suite of trainings across the broad spectrum of the oil and gas sector, and embedding this digitalization components into the process. Now, when it comes to OGTAN's training, which I'll permit me to pause here, and I will take 3 minutes extra. I want extra 3 minutes of my time here. Some 22, 23 years ago, when I graduated, I served with Shell Petroleum, and as a corper, I was in the Health, Safety and Environment Department. Now, after my youth service, my then supervisor, who today is the Executive Director of Operations of Total Energies, Mr. Obi Mimba, said, Justice, you go to Nigerian Society of Nigerian Institute of Safety Professionals and do the HSE competence course that is as accredited by expert. And I said, but I've been here for 1 year and I thought I already have the competence. He said, well, try and get the certification as well. Now, what the Nigerian Institute of Safety Professionals does was that they design their training and get it accredited by SPDC. So virtually every engineering graduate, including not engineering graduates, go to Nigerian NISP to get that HSE accredited certification, because on the certificate, you will see SPDC accredited. And that serves as, what do you call it? A meal ticket for you to get into the door of oil servicing companies, including other oil companies, for you to be taken as an HSE inspector for field activities, which kind of build capacity of fresh graduates. In essence, what I'm trying to say is, if you look at this slide, OGTAN has a role to play in continuous learning. OGTAN should try and partner, if that is not the case right now, should try and partner with the industry and of course with the Ministry of Petroleum Resources, DPRO, NNPC, and have a suite of training where when you issue a certificate on a particular training, on that certificate, it said this certificate, this training is accredited by NNPC, by OPTS, IPPG, and including local content and the Ministry of Petroleum Resources. That certificate will open a lot of doors for our teaming youth in university, those that are in engineering, and of course, the non-engineering sector. So for those that are not in the non-engineering sector, it gives them an idea of an helicopter view of the oil and gas business. So OGTAN, this is a challenge for you because when young recruits go into to look for job, if they have that certification alongside their degrees and after youth service, they have a humanizing digitalization, career opportunities are there for them, and of course, it shapes the future of the energy sector. So this for me is a take home for OGTAN. So why the energy discourse today? The UN described energy as central to, central to every major challenge and opportunity in terms of climate change, job security, and energy is a golden thread that connects economic growth, increased social equity, and an environment that allows the world to thrive. So for ending poverty, energy poverty, and of course, ensuring sustainability are the defining challenges of our time, which is why energy is central to both of them. And I thank OGTAN for making us have this conversation to bring this suite of people. But again, the other three key existential dilemmas have to do with energy poverty. We need to strengthen economic growth, and of course, we need to slow the warming of our planet as it is. So the National Gas Expansion Program, just to give you a sneak peek, is designed and is conceived and designed by the Honorable Minister of State to serve as a catalyst for adding value to the vast natural resources Nigeria is endowed with. So what we're looking to achieve is identification of existing policies, legal and regulatory frameworks, and of course, a commercial instrument that are hindering the development of the local gas sector. And thankfully, this has been codified in the PIA. So the energy transition for a rapidly changing world. Today, we need to ensure that everyone can continue to progress and prosper, and the world needs more and cleaner energy. Put simply, our evolving world needs a multitude of bright energy ideas, especially from training institutions, professional associations like the Oil and Gas Trainers Association of Nigeria. And so you need to bite the bullet and take up this challenge. So this presentation for me is an optimistic invitation to collaborate with a view to providing more and cleaner energy for us to live happily. So in terms of mobilizing all forms of energy, the International Energy Association estimate that the world energy sector investment total 68 trillion from 2015 to 2040, of which 37% is oil and gas. Now, renewable energy, like I just say, can play a vital role in the power supply, but electricity is currently less than 20% of end-use energy resources. So it's not a question of choosing fossil fuels or renewables. Both are vital to meet demand in the coming decades. And here, for us as a country, we see natural gas as a major role to play in the energy transition. And we believe that natural gas as an important component of a sustainable Nigerian, of course, global energy mix. It is also the cleanest burning fossil fuel, no doubt about it. Yes, indeed, renewables have a role to play, which is why we now said in 2020, we declared year of gas, and then from 2021 to 2030, we said it's going to be the decade of gas. So what's going to happen? What is this decade of gas thing? Is it just some catchphrase, some political statement, or is just a buzzword? The answer is no. And I'll explain to you, and you will see for yourself what this means. So the gas utilization value chain in Nigeria is basically nascent and largely underdeveloped, no doubt about it. Now, beyond a handful of companies, NLNG, Indorama, again, recently Greenville, there are not many other existing gas-based industries that consume greater than 70 million scf of gas per day within chemical process plants. And this is a poor rate of domestic utilization for Africa's largest gas reserve holder. The good thing again, however, the government is providing a number of enablers which are needed to realize the full potential of the gas sector. This includes the development of critical infrastructure and systems such as the ongoing OB3 pipeline, the ATK pipeline, and the Nigerian Gas Transportation Network Code, which I will speak to now. Luckily, the PIA further provides new and attractive terms for participation in the Nigerian gas space. Some pundits will not agree that the PIA addresses in its entirety the need for the gas sector to thrive, but I beg to differ, as you will see in subsequent slides, that the government indeed has done the right thing. So for us, gas is said to be the fastest growing transition fuel, and global natural gas consumption is projected to increase by more than 40% by 2050. And based on that, and looking at what we achieved as a nation in the year 2020, the year of gas, whilst acknowledging that there is more work to be done, particularly in the area of domestic utilization of gas to power the economy, there is a chronic shortage, a narrative the government is bent on changing over the next decade. So we declared the decade of gas early this year. And the decade of gas is a decade of elimination of gas flaring, which Uncle Itomi spoke about, a decade of more domestic LPG, and a decade of fully gas-powered economy. So for us, gas is power and energy. It is transport, as in auto gas. It is petrochemical for feedstock. Gas is manufacturing for our industries, and it's also food from fertilizers. And like the former past MD of NLNG did mention, Nigeria has thus far ridden on the back of oil for over 50 years, but the time has come for Nigeria to fly on the wings of gas. The question is, can we fly on the wings of gas? Yes, we will even soar on the wings of gas. Now, coming back to the Decade of Gas initiative, it is basically aimed at transforming the Nigerian energy landscape to run effectively on natural gas. And this is to ensure that Nigeria has as we know, should have the highest petrochemical production capacity in the world, being the largest exporter of polypropylene and other olefins. Nigeria should have, because of our huge gas reserve, which if harnessed, could potentially address the current energy dilemma facing us, include e.g. industrial and domestic usage, in addition to the fact that it's a cleaner energy source. Now, I'd like to say one thing. In terms of all of this, collaboration is key, and this could be summarized into designing policy frameworks which we have for the industry, developing infrastructure for the network of pipelines, appropriate pricing, incentivizing players to drive interest, and essentially, thankfully, this is now embedded in the PIA. And like I did mention, a lot of people will not agree, but the good thing is that the Decade of Gas initiative is a successor to the 2020 Year of Gas Declaration, which heralded several projects in the Nigerian gas space, notably among which is the 614-kilometer AKK pipeline project, a network to connect the eastern flank, and of course, the LNG Train 7. So the initiative also aimed at commercialization of gas flare, like I did mention. The key focus area of the initiative is also to address challenges around Nigerian power generation through gas power plants to address the power gap and all energy poverty. And like the International Energy Forum Secretary General mentioned, His Excellency Joseph McMonigle, he said, as a cleaner alternative to fossil fuel, he said Nigeria and Africa and the most nation, which has had abundant gas resources, but has also faced challenges, trying to tell us that we need to step up and hold that mantle to begin to utilize our abundant natural gas resources. So the Decade of Gas, ladies and gentlemen, like the Honorable Minister had rightly mentioned at different fora, is a decade of opportunity for the country to diversify its economy, create wealth, build infrastructure, come up with different products, employment generation, and of course, securitization of our country. Take a look at what one MCF of gas can do, and yet we flare abundant gas resources. So this is just a schematic view of what the volume of gas we flare can address for us as a nation. Our keke napep can run on auto gas. Our generators can run on LPG, fertilizer, and other things. So gas as a bridging fuel will give us a secured and flexible energy source. And first off, Nigeria and of course the world needs oil and gas. No doubt about it, ladies and gentlemen. You cannot gloss over that. Even whilst we tackle climate change and of pollution, which is a fundamental challenge facing us as a society. But one other thing I'd like to mention again in this presentation is that as technology advances, so does our ability to unlock the world's and of course Nigeria's natural gas resources. Now, despite the promise of renewable, like I did mention, it cannot provide all the world energy that we need. And so gas will also continue to play a critical role in sectors where demand is anticipated to grow. Gas is now everything for Nigeria, ladies and gentlemen, in the year of gas, in the decade of gas. And the federal government is using what we have to get what we want. A good example I will give is that of Trinidad and Tobago, a country that has accomplished much with its gas resources. With a small population of around 1.4 million and only 11 TCF, as opposed to our today 206.53 TCF, that country has developed a globally competitive petrochemicals industry. They are the world's largest exporter of ammonia and second largest exporter of methanol, leading to that sector contributing significantly to the country's GDP. Nigeria has much more than what they have, which means we can do the same thing. And our Nigerian agricultural sector, probably the largest GDP contributor to our economy, would benefit immensely from greater availability of fertilizer using gas as a feedstock. Now, gas is the vision of, in line with the gas policy of the national gas policy, and gas will become the dominant fuel for generating power in Africa. Another thing I'd like to mention is that the major objective of Buhari's administration is to transition Nigeria into an industrialization, like I did earlier mention. Another thing I want to mention in terms of gas process, gas business or gas project, finance, funding is an issue. Now, for small-scale projects in country, the CBN 250 billion intervention for the National Gas Expansion Program readily comes to play. And this is another clause that gives a beacon of hope that in a decade, within this decade, Nigeria's gas sector will have been optimally developed. And equally, like I mentioned earlier, the gas network code, which is a gas market liberalization enabler, is aimed at ensuring our gas pipeline integrity and open access to pipeline and common understanding on metering. So overall, ladies and gentlemen, when we looked at what we did in 2020, and was hinged on two key things: the national gas policy provision and implementation strategy was geared towards harnessing Nigerians' vast gas resources by removing the barriers affecting investment and development in the gas sector and driving the institutional reforms and regulatory changes necessary to evolve into a gas-based industrialized nation. And thankfully, the PIA will address all of these bottlenecks. Now, let me also say this: government cannot do it all alone. So there needs to be some form of collaboration across broad spectrum dimension. Government, industry, academia, and especially professional associations like OGTAN need to home and play in that space. So taking a quick look at the PIA, like I did mention, I won't much dwell on the upstream, but I will speak to the gap, where there's a lacuna in the midstream and of course, to some extent, the downstream sector. So this is the journey that the PIA had taken that took us almost 20 years to achieve, and 21 years opportunity cost is significantly high. And today we're there. Now, the delay in the PIB was stifling our economy. Prospective investors were compelled to look elsewhere due to unstable legal and fiscal terms. And the reports by notable institutions say on an annual basis, we lost as much as 15 billion in investment. And then corroborating the same thing, the Nigerian Natural Resource Center stressed that the delay by different administration in enacting the PIA caused the country an estimated 235 billion worth of investment in the petroleum industry. So due to stagnation, sluggishness. But the good thing is that the present assent to the bill, which is now an act on the 16th of August 2021, making it an act of parliament, has marked the end of decade of inaction, ambiguity, indecision, and underinvestment in the Nigerian industry. So this is what the PIA was necessary yesteryears. They were up and down. It's like driving it against traffic. The other one had to do with the peculiar challenges we face in terms of fiscal issues, high costs, tax burdens that had to do with deferment of core investment, lack of focus on the midstream, like I did mention earlier, and of course, some environmental issues like we know in the oil and gas industry. And these are peculiar issues which basically focus on lack of focus in the midstream. Now, the other changes to support growth and sustainability from an economic point of view, the core principle and considerations were remove uncertainty due to protracted non-overhaul of legal framework, establish good governance, competitiveness, and of course, ease of doing business. So this is, if you like, the grounding philosophy behind the PIA, while paying attention to the following principles: early revenues for government, competitiveness, transparency, and predictability of the oil and gas sector, and of course, not forgetting role clarity and sustainability. So overall, in a one slide, this gives an overview of the PIA. Now, if you look at the PIA, in recognition of the Decade of Gas initiative, it creates a critical foundation for the most desired industrialization and economic development of this country. There are generous incentives to enable development, and the PIA was part of the federal government's resolve and commitment to building a competitive and resilient petroleum industry that will attract investment, improve revenue base, create jobs for our teaming youth and some of those that are listening to them, they don't have jobs, and support the economic diversification agenda of the government. So in a nutshell, the PIA became necessary because Nigeria runs a petroleum industry that is governed largely by laws outdated 50 years ago, such as the principal legislation, the Petroleum Act of 1969, and other outmoded legislation. So the PIA treats gas as a standalone commodity, which is first of its kind in over 50 years of our country's existence as an oil and gas nation. Plus, it creates a distinct midstream decoupled from the upstream gas, which is what prominent renowned lawyers like Uncle George and the lawyers in oil and gas network have been clamoring for. And plus, again, so what the PIA creates is that for upstream players, you can only undertake midstream operations through a separate midstream vehicle. So this regulation, this PIA, this act establishes the Gas Infrastructure Fund that has a governing council, which I will speak to briefly. Now, the good thing about the Gas Infrastructure Fund that it is going to take care of the lacuna, if you like, the debt of infrastructure that we have in country to boost gas penetration across the country. Now, another bit of the PIA intervention is that it's a robust fiscal framework for infrastructure, especially pipeline. Now, yes, infrastructure for gas goes beyond traditional pipeline. More versatile and rapidly deployable, speed-mounted, plug-and-play, batch type, and virtual pipeline technologies will address gas demand in many stranded, underserved markets, which is one of the diagnostics that we had in the gas flight commercialization, to say you don't need to construct a large stretch of pipelines. There are scalable technologies that you can deploy and get gas to hinterlands that have never been reached. And of course, you will see that there is possibility for buyers of gas to commercially bypass distribution companies and buy gas directly from the producers. And both the commission, now there are two regulatory bodies. The PIA introduced a regulatory framework to prevent monopolization and abuses of monopoly power. So the commission, the Nigerian Upstream Regulatory Commission, and the authority, the Nigerian Midstream Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority, are given broad powers to regulate anti-competitive activities in the sector, which takes care of licensees and of course permit holders not to take the regulations for granted. Now, speaking of the midstream, is it midstream and regulatory infrastructure fund? Is it a game changer? The answer is yes, because what happens is that the midstream sector of Nigeria, which includes refining and transportation, like I showed you the ecosystem of the gas value chain, upstream, midstream, and downstream, the midstream has remained the least developed, although having a large market potential for revenue and job creation. So what the midstream fund, the gas infrastructure fund will do is that it will encourage substantial infrastructural development relating to midstream and downstream gas operations. And it will now allow government to invest in gas infrastructure. This will now promote gas distribution pipeline to gas-scarce areas up north and other parts of the country, delivering massive volumes of gas daily to industrial demand centers and commercial clusters. And this will bolster a driving and cost-effective virtual pipeline delivery system for the country. So in wrapping up, I can't end my presentation without mentioning what local content role is in the look from the lens of the PI 2021. And the PI in a nutshell represents a more transparent inclusion and access to opportunities by local content service providers, including OGTAN members and those that will want to join OGTAN. So from an economic and sustainability point of view, I'm wrapping up now, is that it looks at the goals of the Paris Agreement. Goal number 1, eliminate poverty. Goal number 7, like I did mention, energy, which is key to today's presentation by OGTAN. And in addressing that, we'll be addressing the issue of climate change. So we need to achieve a balance between anthropogenic emissions by sources and removals by sink of greenhouse gases in the second half of this decade. So providing more and cleaner energy now and in the future, again, at the 2015 UN adoption of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And in that landmark decision, Nigeria became a signatory to the UN Framework Agreement for Climate Change, with a commitment to make nationally determined contribution for the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. I'm saying all of this because you can't talk about energy challenge without addressing climate change issues. And the NGFCP, the Nigerian Gas Flare Commercialization Program, the Nigerian Gas Expansion Program, and the Decade of Gas Initiative takes 16, ladies and gentlemen, 16 of the 17 UN SDG boxes. And this will now stimulate action over the next couple of years in 5 areas of critical importance: people, planet, prosperity, peace, and of course, partnership. So in rounding up, ladies and gentlemen, professional associations like OGTAN have a critical role to play as key energy stakeholders. OGTAN can also enable a regular supply of highly educated, upskilled, and skilled people who develop and implement solutions to energy and other social challenges. This I'm putting on the lives of the president of OGTAN and his leadership to look at. And again, the lives of OGTAN are uniquely positioned to make a significant contribution because they can combine expertise from different research and education disciplines and consequently provide a non-biased environment for exploring and developing new ideas. In reality, ladies and gentlemen, we cannot predict the future of the industry in absolute terms, but research has shown us a blueprint of what is possible. And it is important we begin preparing for this disruption today at individual, industry, and professional association level, and even at governmental levels. And that is the key message I have to deliver to all. So in conclusion, again, OGTAN leadership and other related supporting structures are also encouraged to engage and provide the right environment for proposal to prosper and to ensure a brighter future. Now, none of this will be possible without commitment from OGTAN leadership and a change of institutional culture to allow more trainee-led ideas and innovative initiatives, new models of learning, including the greater inclusion of digital technologies. I will reiterate that, digital technologies, a lifelong commitment to the continued development of new energy-related professional skills by employers and employees, and last but not the least, improve communication and sharing of resources and expertise. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, the energy challenge, why OGTAN holds the key. Nigeria has a key resource in the palm of its hand, the nation's wealth of learning through OGTAN. OGTAN is uniquely positioned to work with policymakers and the industry to shape a sustainable energy future. We need to harness OGTAN's potential and support their role in the energy challenge. But again, OGTAN needs to take the lead by saying, this is what we have to offer. And in looking at the challenges that the energy sector is facing, this is what we're bringing to the table. I recall the meeting with OGTAN and the Honorable Minister of State. A lot of commitments were made and discussions were held. And there were action items, one of which was for OGTAN to partner with the National Gas Expansion Program that again ties into the subcommittee that I lead. So to do this, we first need to recognize and engage with OGTAN as a source of knowledge-based repository and advice for government and industry looking for energy and other solutions. And only then will the nation discover what a treasure OGTAN has to offer. So in summary, ladies and gentlemen, by 2050, Nigeria will be the third most populous nation. And of course, energy demand will double and will even triple from what we have presently today. So there is a need to support the plans and ambitions of OGTAN and other institutions across the country. Careers in oil and gas, ladies and gentlemen, look secure. I'm speaking to the young graduates, listen to me, and those that are in university. And our industry is and will continue to be a great business to be in. Oil and gas will play an important role in the energy supply for the next 25 years. And this is true whether you support climate change or not. Projections have shown a possible doubling in the population of the country by 2050, and this translates to higher demand for energy resources ranging from petroleum products to electricity, as well as training and of course, capacity building, which OGTAN has a role to play. Thank you very much.
Wow. Thank you, Engineer Justice. That was packed full, so much information, and we had to let you speak because you're representing the ministry and the minister, the Honorable Minister. Without much further ado, I'd like to introduce our next speaker. There's so much more to come. Our next speaker is Charlotte Essed, who is an oil and energy industry professional with expertise in the Nigerian local content, business development, and account management. She's worked as a C-level executive in Fortune 500 companies like Baker Hughes and Halliburton, and she's known to have had a successful track record of taking leadership roles in cross-functional and multidisciplinary project teams. Her other expertise spans across business analysis, consultancy, and strategy, project management as well, process improvement, supply chain management, and technology. She's got 17 years of industry experience. She currently works with AOS Oil, an indigenous oil and energy servicing company, as the Director of Corporate and Regulatory Affairs. Please join me in welcoming Charlotte Essed.
Is it morning now or it's afternoon?
Afternoon already. Thanks to Engineer Justice.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Charlotte. Guys, I'm trying to find my slide. So I think whilst I have David looking for it, because I'm worried. I'm on mute again. I'm trying to get my slide out. I'm not sure where I would have. Okay, I think I find it.
David, if you have it, can you please project?
ETC. Okay, I know I dropped it. I got distracted again. David, I think you're going to help me pull it out again, because I think I worked on two different.
In the meantime, Engineer Justice, kindly share your slides with us because so many people have been asking for it.
Okay, I'll send it across. Right?
So David, do you have the slides for Ms. Charlotte?
I think she's back up. Yep, she's back up now.
Okay.
That's what happens when you're running with three different computers. So back to us. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me, OGTAN, and of course, ETC, which is family for me. I'd like to articulate a few points on Africa's green transition and of course the PIA. Justice has done a good job and he's actually done my job. So I could have actually gone back to my work and allowed Justice continue because he's done everything I wanted to talk about. But, you know, a few things I like to talk about is access into funding. It still remains paramount to the industry revolution. I would say that it remains a transition fuel that takes us to success. Now, we must realize that Africa contributes least to green gas emission, and however, the race to execution remains steadfast to commence this process. Now, as you know, it's not one size that fits all, and I'm glad the minister mentioned it yesterday at the CEPLAT Energy Summit. You know, but we must, as a country, dictate our own NDC targets based on our own peculiarities, and at the same time, we must be ESG compliant to be able to access the kind of fundings that we want to bring. And, you know, Justice had a lot on the gas. It's very, very expensive business. And so I'm not certain that we can access such funding in country. So we must be ESG compliant. And furthermore, all of the social awareness must align with what we call our political and economic willpower. Finally, I'd like to present my perspective of what the EMP and the upstream sector concerns with the new PIA. So this is just me, and that had happened already. So basically the intro for this, for me, what I would call is, it's what is the PIA to us in terms of how do we see treaty here? You know, they have the legal part here, we have the governance. The framework actually is all of this are encompassing. And the good part about it is that they're very nicely articulated some of the rules that comply, you know, in terms of capital allowance, in terms of fuel, petroleum pricing, in terms of the entire works with numbers. I think it was articulated here. As you would go further to my next slide, it basically just talks about the objective. So what I did here was just give you a brief summary of what that PIA talks about. And at the same time, just talk to you about what I think, you know, matters most, especially with the upstream side. The good thing about it is you have to understand what it is. How does this work for us? What is the objective around this? One of the things I like to pick from it is basically that, you know, it deepens the local content practice in the Nigerian oil and gas space. Fiscal rules, that's extremely, we've had issues with different fiscals. We don't have projects have been delayed. And when we have projects delayed in Nigeria in terms of this industry, we're at a flat lateral growth. The key changes that I really like, and I like to always talk about, is basically governance and administration. And that is very key to the kind of business that we operate. The fundamentals in partnership in this sector is basically our host community. They're very important, but at the same time, we need to manage each other. And I think it's called a partnership. Physicals, I spoke about it, and basic provisions that actually sit in this PIA. Now, in governance, I like to quickly talk about what I think takes us and meets us to the next level. Yesterday and day before yesterday, the Senate actually confirmed certain board members for the Nigerian Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission, and of course, the Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Regulatory Commission. I was going through the Q&A session and I see somebody was writing there about what happens to NAPIMS and the other guys. Well, nothing will happen. They will be seated where they are, but as it is, different things are no more. So we don't have PSC, JV, they're now called Asset A, Asset B, Asset C, Asset D. And all of this have asset managers that will be managed, and all of them will be having to sit under the Nigerian Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission. In terms of profit and for oil and for gas, all of this will be payable, you know. The representative of having 1% levy of what we would call the wholesale price for petroleum products sold, that would also be happening. The good thing about this is that NNPC Limited becomes under the KAMA law. As we go by, we would have few guidelines that would show how best it is to possibly have shares. I guess a lot of people are waiting to see how best that will be turning out. Administration quickly is, for me, it just tells us how best we can promote what we have. So I hear the conversations about fossil fuel. I hear the conversations about alternatives. Now, my point, what I like to always talk about is, you know, nobody's taking away from anybody. We just have to have a cleaner end to all of this. And so I liked what Ms. Damilola Ogumbi said yesterday. Getting to net zero doesn't mean zero fossil, and which is always the conversation. We will still have our oil, we will still have our gas, but now we'll be having another conversation on how best we want to administer and bring the other parts of energy into what we're doing. So Justice and Mr. Tubo spoke very well about the gas, and you know, a lot of conversation about renewables being just 20%. But you know, in all of this, it's basically just bringing back infrastructure and technology to what we currently have. So at the meantime, what we need to start to do is start to have a deliberate transition plan. What is the plan? What takes you to the next level? Where is the program that we have to sit back? Simbi mentioned about coal yesterday, and then transitioning into oil. It took forever, years. I think I wrote it somewhere. I can't even remember how much, over decades, or I think about 100 years, 160 years, if I remember. And so for me, it's basically how we can move, you know, transition and have cleaner, but all of that won't be happening if you don't have political willpower, social willpower, economic willpower, financing, and getting all of this through. Host community, very important conversation, and I'm sure we have seen how we have transitioned from what we used to have, what we still have, and what the PIA is talking about. There's been a lot of conversations, but for me, what is important is having these guys as partners. The main objective is basically to have a sustainable prosperity within the host community. If you don't have peace with the host community, you can't have anything. No matter how the act looks like, if you don't have that belief, you don't have that partnership, the host community guys don't see you as a partner. There's no loyalty, there's no trust. Whatever the PIA looks like in paper, you're gonna have issues and difficulties to actually implement. And I'm talking from the upstream end, I'm talking from midstream because you still need them. And of course to the downstream when we're trucking away. So all of this in comparison is what I thought we should be talking about. And that's the perspective for us in the upstream sector. For me, fiscals are most important. I've talked about this, the risks, the rewards, the encouragement it gives to you as an investor, and all of those that it brings back and the amount that you take back as you give back to federal government. Fiscals is it. Without it, we can't go anywhere. We've had major projects. When I started in this industry about 18 years ago, there are major projects that I used to have on a whiteboard in my office back then. I used to monitor and make sure that we were working with, the Nsiko's forever. I don't know when Nsiko is going to ever come from. We've had Bonga Southwest just sitting nice and pretty, but it just has to move to the next level. And this actually is the game changer for fiscal frameworks. The provision, the good thing about the fiscal provision is the fact that we've had embedded 10 laws in between and come together under this fantastic PIA. But in the midst of all of this, why are we talking about PIA? Why are we talking about energy transition? And it's a wake-up call because a lot of people don't understand it. The energy transition just became a buzzword and everybody's just speaking energy transition. And I had a few research done and survey, and I'm like, why are we talking energy transition now? And people don't even realize that it was from the Paris Agreement. People don't also realize that it has something to do with climate change. So yes, it comes back to us because we're an oil producing country. We should be sitting on the wings of gas, but basically in all of this, how do we take it to the next level? So I'd like to close because I see time has gone very well and there's nothing new that hasn't been said. But one of the things I like to say is with our code red actually declared on climate change and the raising tension in fossil fuel in the mix, there are a few things that we need to work around. You need technology, you need partnership, you need collaboration, you need appropriate pricing. But let's not also forget the other part of the message. You need to save the trees and plant more trees because you know what, climate change is so real. And I think I'll move on from here. Thank you so much. It was nice, and it was nice to be on the panel with other strong people.
Thank you so much, Engineer Charlotte Essiet, for your insight into the topic. And we'll move on to Dr. Abubakar Jubril Abbas. Dr. Abbas is a chartered engineer with the Engineering Council UK under the Institution of Gas Engineers and Managers. He's also a PhD graduate in gas and engineering and a fellow of the Higher Education Academy with over 15 years combined industrial and academic experience. He has a passion for research in the field of gas pipelines, gas network code, carbon capture and utilization, hydrogen fuel combustion and utilization, enhanced energy gas recovery, natural gas processing and treatment, LNG facilities, flow assurance, process design, process stimulation, and troubleshooting. He also has substantial on-the-job experience as a process and pipeline engineer at the Trans-Sahara Gas Pipeline Project, the Wale Parsons ExxonMobil's major integrity project, the Escravos Lagos Pipeline Project, and the Abuja-Kaduna-Kano pipeline project, as well as on-the-job experience in process modeling of Olga, Promax, pipe phase, pipe nets, flare nets, and pipe sim. Dr. Abbas is leading international research in collaboration with OPEC and the knowledge transfer partnerships in different areas of energy transition, and also working with the Bryan Research and Enterprise in developing collaborative industry academia process digital teaching and learning through Promax software for process engineering. Dr. Abbas has graduated 6 PhD students in different fields of gas and petroleum engineering, and he has also published several high-impact journal papers. He's currently the program leader, MSc Petroleum and Gas Engineering at the University of Salford, Manchester, UK, and he's a consultant in many gas engineering projects across the globe. You're very welcome, Dr. Abbas, to this program, and we look forward to your insights.
Thank you very much, Kineo. Thank you very much, OGTAN and ETC for getting this conversation together. And as a very patriotic Nigerian, I always look forward to this good opportunities where we can speak and be able to learn from each other. Thank you very much, Mr. Itomi and Justice, as well as Eliseth, who has already digested what I meant to say. But just to say it from a different perspective, my target is just to look at a few key things related to PIA and how are we marrying together the industry value chain for us to deliver and get where we are getting to. So a bit different from other speakers, I will be trying to bring a lot of conversation related to where are we expected to be. Because if we don't know where we are heading to within the next 5-10 years, I'm sure that is where the problem is. So I will try to concentrate on what exactly do we have to do. So the highlight, I will just speak very briefly on only 3 areas: the concept of PIA, as well as a SWOT analysis around the PIA itself. What have we gotten and what do we need to look for in the future? We are glad we have policymakers, we have lawyers in the house. So it's an opportunity for us to really share thoughts and be able to see how the future and what the future hold for us. We'll look through the decade of gas roadmap and where, in my personal opinion, where Nigeria is expected to be after the decade, that is by 2030. And then some very basic concluding remarks. Now, it's always important to see that the concept of energy laws, the concept of energy policy is not new to the global energy industry. A lot of countries have done their own at different part of their life. But what I always take as a key in industry and academic side is learning from the success stories as well as the problems encountered from others. So based on these slides, I'm just trying to say that the 4 pillars of governance set out by the PIA in terms of efficient institutions that have been created, commercial orientation, as well as a profit-driven process we intend to have, with the concept of transparency and accountability, plus the conducive business environment, is very similar concept that Egypt developed in 2016, South Africa developed in 2004, and UK developed in between 1979 to 1986. I'm sure Mr. Itomi and a lot of other elder statesmen will be able to have more history than I have. Possibly I was not born earlier when it started. But the key message here is this. As Nigeria, we have launched this very impressive concept of PIA. Is going to have a lot of impact on our economy, on our citizens, on our livelihood, on our environment. But it's equally important if we understand that the roadmap has a lot of turbulence, and learning from others is going to be the key. So I'm not going to go through what other countries have set up, but be able to just give a SWOT analysis under the current PIA and where we think the government has really tried so much and where we need certain level of improvement. Now, let me start with what we call the strength. We have seen clearly that the PIA has already established those key industry institutions, which is the first step, first and most important step for you to get your energy policy right. UK has done it during Margaret Thatcher in 1979. South Africa has done it. US have done it at different times, but generation of those key institutes the current administration has managed to be able to have created the commission and the authority, which we do believe they have a clear mandate and roles to deliver as to where we are. This is a very good applause from my understanding. The second thing is the government has provided power to regulate the pricing frameworks, which is always very important, because we will be able to see from different economies that if you don't get the price right, you are always likely to get it wrong, because the investment you are looking for may not likely come because it doesn't break even. So we're glad to see that the commission and the authority have the appropriate regulatory power to do it compared to what we used to have before, that everything has to come from the top. Now, the third and most important strength is the competition and market regulation, which we didn't really have much. We do have, but there were a kind of cross-conflict and a kind of situation whereby different institutions are claiming to do certain different things. But now we do have clear entities that are going to manage the competition and market regulation, which is a very good key. We have seen also that the PIB has given opportunity for stakeholders to contribute. And I do believe that this is an opportunity for OGTAN, for Nigerian Gas Association, for many other stakeholders across the value chain to be able to contribute to this policy changes. Obviously, it's not going to be overnight. US took nearly 20 years to get their energy market right. UK managed to do it within 10 years, but we just need to see that Egypt has just launched their own in 2016, but now 5 years after, we'll be able to see what Egypt has achieved over this past 5 years. So that simply means learning from others will be able to help us fast track and where we can get to where we have to get to, learning from those areas. Now, let me just jump onto the weaknesses. In terms of the weakness, we have seen certain things which we still believe that the PIB is a process. So it's not a one-point decision, but it evolves over time, and that evolution is expected to provide key changes over time. We have just seen Mr. President has sent certain amendment, which is a good thing for me, because a lot of people are asking, oh, we have already started making amendment. That is a good thing, because for us to progress, we are expected to see a lot of changes as we move on. And there are many clear changes we expect to see from PIB, and I'm going to mention some of them. So one of the weaknesses that we have so far seen in the PIB is in terms of how the institutions are driving their funds. So one of the key things that we always want government to be careful is when you allow institutions to generate the funding for themselves, it's a good thing, but if there are multiple organizations, multiple entities or government entities that are charging that kind of levies, we may end up with multiple levies, and that could spike prices just for the market growth thing. The second and the most important aspect, this is particularly for the gas industry, the government is still part of the regulation. We have seen it over the years. Egypt have tried it from 2004 until 2016, when they noticed that if we keep regulator part of government, is still going to be a serious problem. So until 2016, they decided, okay, let us create an independent entity where government is not involved at all. But at least we have started getting those institutions right, but gradually we are expecting that we gradually see that the regulators are a kind of detached from government, giving them an independent power to issue regulations and be able to create a level playing ground for every participant to take part. This is particularly important. UK happened to have a government-owned regulator before, until they noticed that that couldn't work. So they had to create OGTAN. We have seen South Africa had to create NESRA, which is an independent body, and we have seen GasReg from Egypt. So these are indication that in most cases, if in terms of gas regulation, you can't keep a regulator under the complete supervision of government, because there could be interference. And the issues we are always worried about investment, investors are not always comfortable if they see government can interface to be able to affect this or to change decisions. Now, another thing is the classification of consumers in terms of names. I have seen part of the PIB where we look at the power sector, gas-based industry. Yeah, typically these are largest consumers of gas. But what we are expected to do is we classify these institutions based on how much gas they consume, so that equally their price will come up in that respect. Because I can be a power generator, but I'm only generating small amount of power. Another plant or another company generates a large amount of power. If you decide you are giving us gas at the same price, is likely going to cause a serious economical issue to the both parties. So these are some of the things that we want government to take on, to be able to look at it critically and make changes. Other things are related to subsidies. We have seen over time, government has done a lot of subsidies, particularly for petroleum sector. That didn't go well, and now we are trying to get rid of it, and it's becoming quite difficult. Why? Simply because we put it around our neck at the beginning, and it's quite difficult. So that is why for the gas, we have seen that the domestic gas obligation is a very good framework. It helps to make sure that the home market has the gas before anybody takes it abroad. However, we get to be very careful that energy market is a global market. If we continue to subsidize on the domestic usage, we are not helping innovation, we are not helping efficiency, and we are not helping competition. It's similar to what happened in every household. If a dad has a domestic obligation to, a dad and the mom obviously has a domestic obligation to provide food on the table as well as clothes. But if a child misbehaves, what will happen? You have every right of removing that incentive. Oh, I used to give you, I used to get you a very nice dress. I will get you a lower quality one, just to encourage you to go to school, because I learned that I have done everything as a father and mother, but you are not doing your part as a child. So if, because of subsidies, government has subsidized power sector pricing, gas-based industry pricing, I can see government is trying to sensitize the deliverability of power to the common man, which is quite right. But over the last 20, 30 years, we have spent how many trillions trying to get power to the common man? We couldn't. Why? The gas subsidy is one of the major problems, because we do not allow innovation, efficiency, and competition to thrive. And that is similar to what Mr. President was saying last week, that the food prices happen to be high because of the middleman. So if we understand that the middleman can have certain monopoly and monopolize the market, so we have to make sure that we treat the food supply chain as an entire value chain, instead of looking at it, okay, let us subsidize the power sector and gas-based industry. We are not helping them, because ultimately we are making them to feel, okay, there is always a leeway to get gas at a cheaper price. And that will obviously send LNG and other IOCs to think outside. We can see globally gas prices is rising. So if you tell me that I have to provide gas to the domestic market, I have every reason, especially in Nigeria, I have every ways to make sure that, because remember in the PIB, there is a leeway that if you don't meet the domestic gas supply obligation, there are reasons given that you are exempted from paying the tariffs. It's quite easy to manipulate those reasons and make sure that I don't pay. I export my gas to Europe or other places where I can get a $5 or $7 or even $17 per million BTU. So these are key things which we do believe government will have to reflect, will have to keep critically looking at changes and be able to take it. Now, in terms of opportunities, this PIA is regarded as the largest political will displayed in Nigeria, no doubt about it. But the most important thing, the institution must champion this evolution. We have seen it that creating a law is not enough. We have all the laws in Nigeria. Traffic rules are there. Every rules are there. But do we follow them? We don't. Why? Because they are not implemented. So what is important is this new institution must sit tightly and be able to deliver this. Otherwise, we have the laws at hand, but the law is not properly applied. Capacity building is another area that is necessary, and that is what we believe OGTAN must come in handy to be able to support this technology-driven market development. We expect improvement in policy and amendment, and we can see that. Now, in terms of the threat, we have seen that it is only in Nigeria that we have this. All our neighbors, such as Egypt, South Africa, our competitors per se, even though we have larger reserves and other things better than them. But we continue to take energy in different parts. And this is affecting our pricing, is affecting our sustainability, and is affecting our long-term energy transition concept. So we have to come back and start looking at energy as energy. Gas, wind, oil, whatever you have is all energy, and it has to go in an energy form. We don't look at gas in volumes only, we look at how much energy it drives, because that enables you to compete. How much energy do I have to use in my CNG vehicle to travel from Abuja to Owerri? And that equally tells me the corresponding cost when I'm using diesel and how much emission am I getting. That will help our policymakers to be able to clear and get a more levelized roadmap towards our energy transition. We have limited time frame to succeed. We can see a lot of divestment. Shell is moving out of the country. A lot of companies are moving away from oil and gas company to energy company. We have just seen it yesterday from Seplat. So these are expected to continue over time. And until we make sure that we use the limited time we have to implement PIA, we may run into trouble. We are not hoping for that, but it's just a learning point, especially for the leadership of the commission as well as the authority. There is lack of awareness, and this is one of the things that troubles me in how we do things. Now, it's important to understand that a lot of those institutions that are currently sitting, waiting to implement PIA are not very conversant with the content of the PIA. Go to FOL, make a FOL in Nigeria and ask Nigerian oil industry expert and workforce. How many of them have read PIA? I'm confidently telling you, more than 70% have never read the PIA. Oh, we are waiting for PIA. When it comes, we work on it. That is not going to happen. So what we expect to see is government creating awareness on this policy, the benefits, the expectation, the training and development, and how things are expected to change, such that not only implementers, even a cleaner in the oil ministry should be able to understand how his or her work is likely going to change due to PIA. That is necessary in my understanding. Now, let us just take it to the gas part, because that is really the part I love most. We have set up the decade of gas roadmap, but this is my personal
thought on where we should be in the next 10 years. We are at a stage where we do have the market has been created by the PIA, but we are still under heavy regulation, limited infrastructure in terms of pipeline, undeveloped reserves. Engineer Justice have already said we already have 206 or there about TCF. But we get to understand that we still have monopoly around our transmission and distribution system. So we should expect to have some market growth, market development, regulation coming on to maintain competition, increase private sector participation. And how can that happen? It's only through transparency, through collaboration, through making sure that there is adequate skills requirement for people to move from one type of system to another. Supply option versus demand. If you look at it, most of our power problem is happening simply because a lot of gas supply is coming from a monopolistic approach. But once we have a lot of private sector building pipelines, getting gas supplied, we have seen Engineer Justice has talked about the virtual pipelines, the truck system, the mini grid LNG. These are all meant to diversify supply, be able to get us where we are getting. And that will improve the third-party access so that by 2017, we are able to achieve a matured, semi-matured market, see the regulated competition. Government is drawing a bit out of being in the middle of it, getting interconnected structures, export domestic gas convergence, and unbundled supply. And if we are lucky, we get a fully matured market by 2030. How will that happen? We are expecting a lot of transformation, and that will help to get prices low, because the main target of government is to make sure that the common man who uses this LPG is buying it at the cheapest possible prices. Now, just few more slides to go. It's important to understand that for the regulation to work, it's important to see that what is our roadmap. So in part of this, the market has opened already, so which is a market opening step. This is a very good, the PIA has already provided that. We are expecting to see a lot of changes in terms of gas network access and tariffs. This is important because if we look at our transmission and distribution system, the tariffs are not cost reflective. Okay, take for example, is $0.8 per million BTU to transport gas on transmission line, but it's about $3.8 per million BTU in the distribution system. Why? Simply because there is a lack of appropriate regulation in terms of how network will be accessed. We expect a lot of work to be done in that area, and that is really where ETC and OGTAN will be able to provide a lot of support in terms of how will government open up this third-party access. I always tell people this process is not a government alone process. Industry stakeholders such as OGTAN, ETC are key because of the knowledge and skill sharing avenues they provide. We'll be able to provide a much more enhanced balancing rules so that if there's a daily nomination, daily confirmation, what are those rules that will make sure that you meet your obligation? We will look at the TPA storage, which is third-party access, gas release program, as well as trading. So we don't have much time, but I have just for the purpose of this workshop, draw up a certain roadmap that we can get there. But how do we get there? It requires a lot of commitment from government, from institutions to be able to make sure we are moving on. My last slide, second to the last slide, is talking about market comparison. Now, if we look at, compare ourselves to our neighbors, Egypt and South Africa, we have more population than them. But let us look at the gas consumption. Nigeria consumes about 1.7 BCF a day, but Egypt consumes 5.6 BCF a day. And remember, Egypt do not even have the reserve we have. How much reserve Egypt has? 77. How much reserve do we have? More than 200. That simply tells us something is right, is wrong. If we have low gas consumption, but we have more gas, there is something wrong. Now, more importantly, I want to talk about the pipeline length. In Nigeria, we only have about 4,000 to 5,000 kilometer of pipelines, Egypt has more than 40,000 kilometers, right? Now, I don't want to talk much about South Africa because they are not gas nations. They are importing most of their gas. But let us clearly look at the pricing. The PIE is stipulating that we should sell gas between the range of 0.9 to 3.2, creating a ceiling. How much is Egypt selling gas? 4.5. Nobody needs to tell you that if your price in Nigeria is cheap, I have every right to set up a business and export to Egypt and be able to make a difference of how much? More than $3. These are some of the key things that the government, we expect government to look at it from a regional perspective, from a global perspective, prior to setting up prices. We do know that government has a infinite passion to help people. Yeah, that is very right. But getting the prices wrong is definitely going to affect the entire market development, and that may not get us the economic growth we want. And lastly, we can see in terms of electricity price, Nigerians pay about $0.059 per kilowatt. How much Egyptians are paying? 0.045. And we can see that our local companies generating electricity in Nigeria are still insisting the amount you pay is not enough. We have to increase the tariff. Why? Because our value chain is not integrated. There is no incentive for companies to produce gas and process it, no incentive for generating a transmission system, and equally no incentive for distribution. So until government look critically into this, but we are glad to see that the midstream and downstream sectors are now separated, and there are key regulatory power to impose such rules. And we expect that the interlink between gas and electricity market, as my mentor, Mr. Itomi has said, that you can't separate gas and power. The gas you require from upstream, you require it to be transported for the power to be generated. Now, but the only thing is, we know that the network code has been launched, but we get to look at how are those entry and exit rules explained. And that is really where OGTAN and ETC are very much of help here, to be able to provide understanding of how business are expected to change due to this legislation, and what do we expect to have if we get to where we are getting. And the last slide I have is just going to give a conclusion. Nigeria's oil industry has a very promising future. I'm very glad to say that. But transparency, independence, and capacity building are the key steps we require to get to where we are getting, where we plan to get to. The learning from similar economies such as Egypt and South Africa is also vital. I don't normally compare ourselves with the UK because they are much more advanced in terms of gas systems, even though our network code are very much interrelated, but we get to see how do we become a regional power in terms of gas. Policies towards regional and international synergy are necessary to drive investment. So we should not only concentrate on building domestic market, completely isolating the export market. It's never going to happen. And if we continue to do it, it will take us a longer time than necessary to get where we are getting. Thank you very much, guys. I have so much to say, but considering the limited time, I will have to stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Abbas. Very enlightening, very, very enlightening. We'll move very quickly to our last speaker. His name is Norbert Schilsuk. He's the CEO of EcoCity Projects Limited. He's a leading authority in Nigerian gas markets, playing key roles in the emergence of the NLNG off-takers club that led to the revival and growth of the Nigerian LPG sector from 48,000 metric tons per annum in 2007 to approximately 1 million tons per annum as at 2019. He has several projects under his belt and several achievements, one of which was he was a member of the Light Up Lagos Project Committee 2017 to 2018, tasked with the development of strategies for delivery of 3,000 megawatts of electricity to Lagos. He drew up the master plan for development of the Bonla water project to supply 3 million homes in the Lekki Peninsula with clean, potable water. He's a leading advisor on gas empowering Nigeria. Please join me in welcoming Norbert Schills.
Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Afolabi, thank you very much. The problem with speaking last is number one, people are tired. Number two, I've heard from, the likes of Dr. Abubakar. When I heard the CV, I felt like just hiding mine. Thank you very much, Mr. Itomi, and Justice. Thank you very much. Those are very, very insightful notes you have dropped here. And to Eshet, thank you very much as well. So I'm going to do my best to make this very interactive because, of course, there's nothing that can be said again that has not been said by my predecessors. I'm the last one of the house today, so I have the privilege of riding on their own, what they've laid, the foundation they've laid already. So I want to make it very interactive. There are several schools of thought. There are people that believe that the issue of transition is a conspiracy. There are others that are advocates of climate change and energy transition. But at the end of the day, the decision is up to all of us. And I'm going to share a screen here because I want to do some live assessment with everybody. We're going to do analysis together. At the end of this analysis, I'm going to take you to just one slide, and we're going to take you to what the possibilities are for Nigeria. This is a chart on the Energy Agency's website. If you want to check the website, you can go to iea.org. So it's a very, very authoritative source of oil and gas information. Now, this is a chart that shows the oil and gas, the crude oil supply and demand data from 1971 to the year 2020. The green line indicates demand, which is how much oil people demand. The blue line, that's the very light blue line. It's about, the blue line is production. So the light blue line says crude oil and NGL production, right? And then the dark blue line is demand. Now, from the year 1975, as you can see, there was sort of a meeting point here. But along the line, of course, demand surpassed production, right? Sorry, production surpassed demand. Coming all the way down to the 2020. Now, the demand for oil has dropped, and then production is still going up. The PIA, which started as PIB, which is a petroleum industry bill, was initiated in the year 2000. In 1999, the late Rilwan Lukman came up with the idea to reform the sector because he felt that there was need to reform the sector to attract more investments. As at the year 2000, you can see there's a huge gap between the production and demand for oil. Now, fast forward 2021, so which means 20 years after the PIB was conceptualized was when we passed the bill. The question is, what was it? What was the opportunity that the late Rilwan Lukman saw that necessitated the reform of the oil industry? 20 years have passed. Does it mean that that opportunity has passed for oil? Now, this is a question for you all, but this is chart number one. Chart number two, I'm going to share with you guys. OPEC basically controls 79% of oil reserves. This is OPEC data. So this is not my data, this is OPEC data. So please be attentive. OPEC controls about 79 billion barrels in terms of oil reserve. That's 79% of total world reserves in oil. The rest of the countries control about 20%. Now, look at what is happening with OPEC. This is the data in terms of the investment that's coming into upstream projects for OPEC members. 2017, they were by 40 billion. 2018, that figure dropped. 2019 dropped further. 2020, in spite of COVID, it increased a little. But look at where we are in 2021. The number of investments in upstream production and exploration has dropped significantly. Where the last quarter of 2021, we had just 15 billion in terms of investment that's committed into upstream projects for oil. And this is for OPEC members who own more than 70% of the gas reserves of the world. Now, why am I saying this? I want to just make one point before I move on to the next. There was a conference of oil and gas ministers of African countries that happened a few months ago. And they issued a communique at the end of the day to say that there's a conspiracy by the Western world to deprive Africa of oil wealth. Now, we've had oil since 1957 in Nigeria. That's more than 60 years of our existence. That's more than our years of existence as a democracy. The question is, what have we done with the opportunity? What have we done with the oil wealth that was given to us? Now, a lot is happening, and I'm going to take you there shortly. This is also the World Economic Forum website. So the World Economic Forum happens once in a while, and once in a year in Switzerland, and they issue communiques and they do a lot of very insightful research and give sort of an indication of where the world is going. Technocrats, business leaders, world leaders, academics such as Dr. Abbas, all go to this summit. Now, the cost of solar and wind has dropped significantly since 2010. As at 2010, it was more expensive to produce electricity with solar. It was at 35 cents, right? Fast forward 10 years, the cost of producing electricity with solar is less than 10 cents per kilowatt hour. Now, absorb all of this while I take you to the last slide I'm going to share. So which means it is now cheaper to produce electricity with solar rather than oil. Now, sorry, there's no time. I will have shared some, projects that have come up in Nigeria that shows you the adoption rate of solar in the country. So having given you all of this data, right? Oil demand is dropping. So which means oil demand is going below production, right? And so we're producing more than the world would consume. I want to now share something with you. If you have a calculator or you have your Excel sheet open, please just open it up and let's do some calculation together. Because with this, you'll be able to now know where Nigeria stands, and then you will not be able to, you don't need to listen to me as to where the world is going. You don't need to imagine that there's a conspiracy going on, but you should be able to decide for yourself and position yourself and your business for the opportunities that are going to come. So, Justice, please tell me if I'm wrong. Nigeria has about 203 TCF of gas, right? So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3.
206. 206.
206.
Okay, 206. Good. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I guess that's 200 TCF, I guess, right? Now, production, just as you've mentioned about the consumption of natural gas in country is not, is about 70 million or so. But let me say, I assume that Nigeria's production of oil is about 1.6 TCF, 1.6 BCF a year. So that's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Before I get to that calculation, let me calculate how much gas you need every year times 365. So which means you need about 584 BCF of gas, billion cubic feet of gas. Now leave that there before I do my next calculation. How much oil does Nigeria have? Nigeria has about 37 billion barrels of gas. So that's 37, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. 37 billion. So this is oil in barrels. This is gas in TCF, right? So Nigeria's crude oil allocation, OPEC used to give us an allocation of 2.5 million barrels a day. They allowed us to produce. A few years ago, it dropped to 2 million barrels a day. Last year, it was 1.7 million barrels a day. Today, OPEC allocation to us about 1.56 million barrels a day that we're allowed to produce, right? Now, so that means in 365 days, you would be producing this amount of oil. Now, your 37 billion barrels divide by this means you have about 64 years left of oil reserves. And don't forget, you cannot recover most of these oil reserves. You might recover maybe 85, 90%. Justice, am I right?
Yes, you are. You're targeted.
Okay, good. So now that you have seen oil, let's go to gas. You need about 584. So 200 trillion divided by 584 is 354 years. Now, I want to ask the panel, do you consider Nigeria an oil country or a gas nation? That is a question I want to ask you, right? And once you're able to answer that, keep that at the back of your mind while I take you to a bigger slide that shows you where the world is transiting, and then you can do your own assessment and say, where do you place Nigeria? Where do you place Nigeria's future? Where do you place your future as a person, as a company, your children's future? All of that is dependent on what is happening in the market and how you position yourself. Dr. Lukman started the PIB in 2000. The first time they were able to position it for the National Assembly was in 2008. That bill never saw the light of day. By 2011, they put another one. 2012, 2014, 2018, they managed to get the first passage. By 2021, by the grace of God, I'm thankful for this very, very visionary leadership, driven by the Honorable Minister's Office, who, by dogged determination, were able to get it passed. But it was 20 years after it was initiated, 20 years after the man dreamt a dream. So has the opportunity passed? That is a question you need to answer for yourself while I take you to the next slide. And while I'm doing that, this calculation, you can do it for yourself. It's a straight line calculation. Any layman can do this. So this is like calculation. I'm breaking it down to the basics. So let me take you to my final slide so that I don't bore you. But this is an exercise I want us to do so that I'll be able to answer questions by ourselves and not have to wait for academics or conspirators that will now come and tell us what is happening. So now this is just one slide, so I'm not going to waste your time. I know you're tired, you want to go for lunch, so please indulge me for 5 minutes. I shared this yesterday at the Separate Energy Summit, and I'm going to share it today and explain. Yesterday I didn't have time, but today I'm going to explain it to you. I'm going to end with where Nigeria fits into the picture, and then you would have to be able to now go back and see where you fit into this. Now, if you look at the top right corner of the picture, you'll see 2015. As of 2015, finally, the climate activists and advocates of climate change were able to convince 196 countries to sign the climate accord. And the target is to limit global warming to 1.5 to 2 degrees by 2050. Now, the reason for this was that scientific evidence shows that global warming is a result of greenhouse gases, right? And greenhouse gases is just basically CO2 that's been pumped into the air, CO2 and other emissions that have been pumped into the air. Now, the data also shows that 65% of those greenhouse gases comes from the energy sector, which is gas flaring, transportation, and so on and so forth, right? Now, that was 2015. Fast forward 6 years. So 2015, right here, 2021. Now, I'll start from the left. In the US, the number of rigs are declining by 7% on the average every year since 2015. So which means since they came out from Paris, the number of rigs that have been in operation have been dropping by 7% every year in the US. So that means there's less and less exploration. Number two, the North Sea has been the most important destination, or what I say source of crude oil for the entire world. If you hear about Brent, Brent comes from the North Sea. So the North Sea pumps majority of the oil that comes into the world, into the energy market, and also determines the price of crude oil. But guess what? The North Sea is shutting down. 10% of all the oil installations in the North Sea are being decommissioned, right? Denmark, one of the major stakeholders there in the North Sea, they say that by 2050, they want to stop production of oil. In fact, right now, they are not putting any more money in drilling new wells. Now, come down to number 4 before I go to number 3. Saudi Arabia is one of the biggest holders of oil reserves in the world. But guess what they're doing? Saudi Arabia announced that they will cut power generation by 50% from fossils. So which means in the next 10 years, all the electricity supply in Saudi Arabia will be from solar, wind, and other renewables, right? To put their money where their mouth is, they have committed about $30 billion. Now, come back home to Nigeria. Shell is divesting all of its onshore and nearshore assets. They've also changed their name from Shell Petroleum to Shell Energy. Apart from Shell changing their name, Chevron have also committed $10 billion to invest in renewables, including investment in Nigeria. In Europe, Total is committing $60 billion for investment in renewables. They have also changed their name from Total Petroleum or whatever they were used to call themselves to Total Energy. Now, reason this with me. What do you think is happening in your own assessment based on all the information I've given you before and what you see here happening? Now, in Nigeria, they say, follow who sabi road. The question is, do you think these people are moving out of, when I heard the African minister say that there's a conspiracy to deprive Africa of oil wealth, and I say, how much oil do we have? We do not have as much oil as Saudi. We do not have as much oil as the North Sea. We do not have as much oil as the rest of the members of OPEC that have oil. We're the 7th, I think. So why do you think those guys are willing to, why do you think their move towards renewables is because there's a conspiracy? This is a question. Now, but leave that question aside. 2021, look at the middle. 33% oil, renewables have now surpassed nuclear in terms of utilization for electricity. So which means across the globe, nuclear used to be a major deal. Now renewables are producing more electricity and powering more countries than nuclear. This is what is happening in the world. The world is moving towards a certain direction. Now, guess what will happen in the future? Let me take you down to 2050. By 2050, it is assumed by like 20% of all passenger vehicles will be electric. When that happens, it is equivalent to 21 million barrels of oil consumption. So which means the demand for oil will drop by 21 million barrels a year. Sorry, a day. Which means even this quota for OPEC that they've given you of 1.5 million barrels is going to drop even further. Don't forget, Nigeria used to sell 2 million barrels of oil, 2.5. Now, OPEC is saying you can only supply 1.5 because they want to control the prices. In the next few years, our quota from OPEC will continue to drop. So which means the money we're earning from oil will continue to decline the more, and we're gonna have more issues of revenues. Government revenue is gonna decline, right? And dip significantly because our oil revenue is gonna dip, right? When that happens, the Naira is gonna exchange for a rate that I cannot even begin to imagine because we're not gonna have dollars anymore. Now, let's fast forward. In 2050, there are two schools of thought. The first school of thought believes that this change in the global market is going to be gradual. And so on the left here, you can see there's a chart that shows that The red line just basically shows that emissions is going to be business as usual. So imagine that that red line is crude oil. It's not going to drop, right? And so they imagine that crude oil will still play a very, very significant role. And then when that happens, it simply means emissions will continue to rise. Now keep looking at the left side of your screen. The left side of your screen shows basically the global temperatures will rise, sea levels will rise, the corals will be dead, there'll be drought and food shortages, and there'll be economic recession, even though you've been enjoying your crude oil money. Now, leave this aside. Let's go to the right side narrative. On the right narrative, this is led by scenarios from the International Energy Agency, from IRENA, from BP Shell. They've all run scenarios, and they believe that this is a possibility for the world to trend towards. Number one, they believe that renewables will play a significant role. And guess what? 50% of vehicles in passenger vehicles in Europe and America will all be electric vehicles. It's cheaper now. The battery technology is improving and so on and so. This is more possible. Just go on the internet, see what Elon Musk is doing, see what GE, Mercedes, all of them are already trending towards electric vehicles. Solar will produce about 69% of all grid connected power. I just showed you the cost of solar has dropped to less than 10 cents. It's going to go to less than 5 cents per kilowatt hour. To produce electricity in Nigeria is about 10 cents, thereabout, or maybe 12 cents. So if you do 10 cents, if I'm even talking about diesel, you're talking about 75 cents. So which means it will be cheaper for you to produce with solar than you do with the other fossil fuels. Natural gas will be the gas of the future. Here's the reason why. Natural gas is a mature fuel. Natural gas is more established in terms of technology, in terms of infrastructure in place and so on, than solar. Natural gas also emits less emissions than crude oil and coal. So their prediction is that coal and oil will go down, but natural gas will remain strong because even the solar and the wind might not be able to replace, and all the fossils, which basically puts more credence to the argument of my predecessor, which says that oil will still play a key role in the future. They believe that oil will come down to about 9%, 16%, coal 9%, but natural gas will hit about 30%. So which means the future, if you paint a picture of the future, you're gonna see natural gas and oil. Now, having shown you the calculation I made earlier that showed you that Nigeria has about 300 years in gas supply, right? Crude oil is about 60 years. So which means if you have a child that today is about, if you give birth to your child today, by the time they are 60, Nigeria will not have any more oil being produced. Do you understand? So which means your children's children will have no oil to sell as long as we miss the target with gas. And this is why I am so impressed with Justice and the minister's team for the focus on gas. And that is the biggest win for me in terms of a PIA. I've told you the PIB was birthed in the year 2000 because the initiator saw an opportunity that there will be 10, 15 years of oil play. I showed you the graph. You can see that oil demand rose gradually throughout that period up to when it started declining, right? And so he saw an opportunity and said, look, we need to attract more investment so we'll be able to sell more oil and take advantage of this. But I think the opportunity for oil is passing. The opportunity, the new door that's opening onto us is a door for gas, and we cannot miss that opportunity. And here is where it's going to take us. Now look at the bottom of the screen. Nigeria today has about 200 million people based on the World Bank data. By 2050, it estimates that we're going to have 400 million people in Nigeria. When that happens, that means you're going to have 68 million households. Now, each of those households today, 75% of households use firewood, right? 75% of those households, don't have, 46% don't have access to electricity. Now, what will happen in 50 years? Here's a possibility. And I'm painting it so that you will know where you direct your investment. Let me focus on only the map that shows gas. At the bottom, which is a hooks, you can see that, before I get to that, just see what the World Economic Forum says. It says that a faster path, which is a path to the future, will require major coordinated effort of policy, which is government policy. And here's what government is doing. Government has launched the AKK project. Justice has just told you about the gas, decade of gas. As part of a decade of gas, they're launching the National Gas Expansion Program, where they intend to roll out cooking gas for 30 million homes, and they all intend to roll out alternative fuel, which is CNG, for vehicles. Now, this is what government is doing in terms of policy, but it's not enough, right? Private sector has to come in, which is where SEPLAT is also coming in to say, look, we are going to focus on energy, on new energy. Total is also investing about $60 billion. Chevron is saying they're offering $10 billion. So private sector has to come in again, because not just is the fate of the world at stake, but also if you do not change your perspective, by 2050, you'll be out of business when you are simply an oil company. Nigeria will be out of oil reserves, so you have nothing to sell. So which means if you don't change your perspective from oil to gas, you're not gonna have a place at the table by 2050. Now, the other factors that will play a role is international support, of course. At the 2015 accord, the International Committee offered to provide $100 billion to support nations that are still developing. And so Nigeria will be able to get access to that $100 billion. Technology too is advancing. There's technology in terms of hydrogen in China. Over 1,000 buses currently use, they have over 1,000 refueling stations using hydrogen. In Europe, the government is already passing a law that by 2030, no more production of diesel and petrol vehicles. So a lot is happening in the international community. Technology is also advancing, but the most important is societal behavior. If Nigerians, and this is, I think one of the, was it Justice or Dr. Abubakar talked about, the role of the community. It is very, very important for Nigerians to be able to change their mentality, right? Change your mentality. Subsidy is no longer the way forward. We have to be ready to pay the right price for the best energy. Now, here's what will happen. Nigeria has about 12 million vehicles today. By 2050, we're going to have about 23.8 million vehicles. If 50% of those vehicles can be converted to use natural gas, it means that they can easily consume 2 billion cubic feet of gas per day. Now, in Iran, there are 5 million vehicles using natural gas in Iran. Those vehicles consume about 750 million cubic feet of gas per day. So you can see that 750 is bigger than all of the gas consumed by all the power plants in Nigeria. We can achieve that same feat because by 2050, if 50% of the vehicles in Nigeria run on gas, you'll be consuming 2 billion cubic feet of gas. Come down to LPG. There will be 68 million homes. In South Africa, 85% of the homes have LPG. So which means if you're able to convert 85% of the number of homes in Nigeria to LPG, you'll be able to get them consuming 6.5 million tons of LPG per annum. Come down to solar. Solar, based on estimate by McKinsey, shows that Nigeria's solar off-grid opportunity is about $17 to $20 billion a year. That is a massive opportunity for everybody to participate. Now, we have about 206 trillion cubic feet of gas in reserves. Also, we have about 600 trillion cubic of gas that's called probable. So it means there are potential reserves that need to be drilled and proven, right? So I'm assuming that if Nigeria focuses on exploring these probable reserves of gas in the next 30 years, we'll be able to have at least maybe 75% of that proven, which brings it to about 450 TCF. If you have 450 TCF, I just calculated for you that 200 TCF means we have 300 years of play in gas. If we do 450, it means we have a millennium to go in gas play. That is what we call energy security. The security of a nation, and a place at the table of the Committee of Nations by 2050 is at stake as long as we're able to make our gas, our 400 million people by 2050, as far as we're able to cooperate with government to drive all of this, I think this is where it will go. But it also can go left. And here's why. By 2050, we would have already expended half of our crude oil reserves. By 2050 also, because of the impact of the global recession that will be driven by global warming, more tsunamis, drought, and so on, there will be global recession. And when there's global recession, there's also a dip in the demand for oil. When that happens, we'll have less and less and less oil to sell. We'll also have less and less and less dollar revenue. And when that happens, our naira can easily exchange for 10,000. Our dollar can easily, the dollar can easily exchange for 10,000 naira. We're gonna have insecurity. We're gonna have, depleted reserves, and we're gonna have gas that's basically stranded. And this will happen, especially where we leave the government, justice, and its people to be struggling alone. It's time for Nigerians to join their hands and to put their hands to the plow. It's time also for private initiatives. It's time also for the international community to join in. And so this is my perspective. And I hope that, we're going to share this with you. And I'm going to wait for questions. Let me see if there are any questions with respect to how you perceive what I've just shared with you. Thank you very much for taking your time, but I hope it was worth it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Norbert. That was a very insightful analysis, and I think it's left a lot of us with food for thought on how we can get into the market as well in renewables and other forms of energy apart from oil. So thank you so much for that analysis. So we've now come to the end of the lecture series. We have a number of questions in our chat box. We will try and take a few, but as my co-moderator said, anyone we're not able to answer right now, we will get back to the appropriate people after this webinar, after this lecture. So I think the first question I have here is from a Mr. Austin Ogu. He said it would be great if you could describe the gas component like the LPG, CNG, and its application for business use. We would like to know how it can be related to capacity building as a business option. And
okay,
actually, Mr. Actually answer that for us, please.
Okay, I should answer that?
Yes, please.
Okay, so LPG is liquefied petroleum gas, and there are two forms of liquefied petroleum gas. There's propane, which is lighter and gaseous. And then there's also butane, which is largely what you have in your kitchen because it's heavier, and it could be liquid when stored under pressure. It's what you use in your kitchen at the moment, right? But there's also CNG, which is just compressed natural gas, and basically it's stored at a higher pressure, at least 200 bars. And it's just strictly natural gas that's been compressed, and you can use it for fueling your vehicle. You can use it for power generation. You can use it for petrochemical production, and so on and so forth. But LPG in Nigeria, as we see, we only use it for cooking. But LPG can be used for pesticides. Most of the, what do you call it? During our time, we call it shell tox. You guys now call it insecticide, right? But this is the insecticide you use in your house is basically LPG, right? In the US, LPG is used for agriculture because of global warming and the implications on the environment. The government is passing a regulation to stop the use of insecticides and pesticides for agriculture. And so people are using LPG now for weeding. So for control of weeds, they burn LPG flames. This is our information we share on our series, which is how to start an LPG bottling plant. So when you register for those programs, you get to hear more about what LPG is and what you can use it for. But so far, this is what I can share because, of course, we're out of time. But you can have more when you participate in our programs.
Thank you so much, Mr. Norbert. So I'd like to direct a question to Engineer Justice as well. So you spoke about upgrading your skill sets to take part in the workforce. And there's a question here. It says, how does one position themselves for the right opportunity to be part of the workforce that can actually effect the much needed change? The person has a PhD in petroleum and gas engineering and is very passionate about the application of emerging digital technology to the industry. So the person just wants to know how you can position yourself for the right opportunities.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll just make it very simple and thank God that Norbert is here and Uncle George Itomi, they're here. So I'll actually put them on the spot. And the thing is this, one thing that has brought me this far as a young man, not as an old young man, I think I'm still young, is that I look for opportunities to serve as an intern, where there may not be monetary value there, but the wealth of experience you gather from people mentoring you take you to places. Nobody can attest to that. Uncle George can attest to that because Uncle George has been a great mentor to very many young lawyers, including one of the lawyers that recently won an award in his firm. Now, having those trainings and then looking at what the industry is like now, mid-term and long-term. So if you look at the projections I made, and equally the projections that my friend Norbert made, you would now say, okay, what kind of skill set do I need to have to be able to be competitive in that space? And then you begin to upskill yourself. Now, like I did mention earlier this year when I was delivering a keynote at the Benito University and PTI, I said our curricula need to change, looking at what the digital age has offered to us, looking at what the fourth industrial revolution has brought to play. Because if we begin to maintain this status quo ante with what we have in our universities, in our higher institutions of learning, trust me, doing catch-up will be a problem. So for this PhD holder, it's even a higher one, PhD. So what he can do now for me is look at organizations that you have, again, so network comes into play, networking. Have friends, make friends with professionals in the industry on LinkedIn. And by the time you become their friend, you now say, look, can I come and support you in this or in that area? What that does is that in the process of doing that, job opportunities come in. I'm not boasting, I have through LinkedIn given 4 or 5 people jobs. While I was in Shell, even now. Now, if somebody write, like the PhD holder, and I write to Norbert, say, look, Mr. Norbert, in the process of doing your consultancy job, if you need somebody to support you pro bono, I can do this. Yeah. Norbert in his wisdom will say, no, I can actually pay you for you to do this if you have this skill set. The same thing with Uncle Joe. The same thing with some people listening to me. Charlotte is there. My friend, I don't know if my friend and my parent is there as well. All of these people have some connect in the industry. So by the time you begin to connect, so networking is very key. And then while you're doing the networking, you must have what it takes. Because, I mean, you can't just come to me to say, I want you to find me a job, I want work. And then I ask you, what kind of job? Any job. What's that? So that way, people just switch up, say any job. So, okay, every morning come to my house and clean my car, and then you have a PhD. How would you feel? So I think it rests on the individual, number one, to upskill and get to know the necessary jobs that will come into play in the short, mid, and long term, and network and try to see whether you can do pro bono. Now, pro bono could be 3 months, it could be 6 months. 6 months after, if you get a job, what difference does it make as opposed to just staying idle for 1, 2, 3 years? I think I will stop. I don't know what nobody has something to add, which I think he should.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. You've covered, enough ground.
Can I just interrupt? Norbert, sorry. I was just going to say that, in discussing subjects like this, I just go back to history. Like I said, I'm lucky to be around when the banking revolution took place, when telecoms took place. The challenge was always, do we have Nigerians who could rise up to take advantage of the opportunities that were opening up? So my answer to the question is this: it's not just your knowledge, it's the heart to work, the heart for adventure, the heart to break new territory. That's the first equipment you require inside you. And then when you present yourself, you will find the mentors. I told you the story of when some of the people who control the banking sector at the time, mostly being teleguided from abroad, actually wrote to the minister to say Nigeria was not ripe enough for banking to be transferred. This was when they wanted to implement a long-term government policy to try and indigenize banking. You know what they did? Government plays a big role here. They just went down the ladder, picked up a young man called Ibitimi Banigo, and took him as GM Chase, took him over as 6 months later, confirmed him as IND, and he became a factory of managing directors for banks. Because when the banking industry broke up and created exponential opportunities, Nigerians answered the call. So it's all about us. I don't think we can look at a greater opportunity to reshape our future than this challenge of the energy transition. And just as I said it all, government will play its own role, but it depends on you, the individual. So for the gentleman who's asking that question, present yourself. It's a challenge. We need to take our destiny into our own hands. Norbert, I love your presentation. It's black and white. There are no gray areas. You either decide to take this challenge and move to natural, or die in your present state. No in between. I agree that there's no single pathway to energy transition, but the future was what you were discussing. So we Nigerians, we see it's clear to us. It's 300 years of prosperity, or it's 50 years of clear doom. Yes. So, gentlemen, and to all Nigerians, the journey has just begun. And to OGTAN, thank you so much for this. We need to take this message. There's so much for everybody in the PIA, including your villagers. We Nigerians need to take it down and let them know how they fit into this. This is our collective future at stake. Everybody has a bite at this cherry. So we go down to the villagers, all those who are making so much noise about what they get under host community. I don't know, you are sharing, you are not building. Let them know that we must build before we share. That message has to sink down. Justice and I come from Okrika. We're one of the most impacted areas. So many of us can't wait to see the back of crude oil exploration. But then the message would be to our people would be, how do we then integrate ourselves into this bright future that's coming? The same message goes to Nigerians far up north. What's all this banditry for? When there's so much endowment for renewables, by just what God has just given to you there. With all that energy to go and do what you are doing, why don't you sort of redirect it? But the direction must come from those of us who God has given the gift of knowledge to redirect our people. So the clear answer is your heart. Your knowledge is good, but it's your heart. And the message is cut across from politicians to the unborn child. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Itomi. My co-moderator, Kinyovo, can I please ask that for the sake of time, let's move on to some of the other activities that we have planned for today. We'll get the answers to all of the questions communicated to all those who asked them, and have the panelists answer those questions. Please bear with us. I want us to listen to this not so young man, but I can call him a young man. He's the founder and CEO of Conrad Clark Nigeria Limited. His name is Joachim Adenusi, who is a consummate and forward-thinking enterprise leadership and strategic risk management professional. He has a bachelor's degree in actuarial science from the University of Lagos, a postgraduate diploma in actuarial science at the Cass Business School, London, and a master's in risk management from Glasgow, Caledonian University, Scotland. He's currently a doctorate degree student at the University of, I'm trying to see which university is that. I can't, maybe he'll share that with us. But he wants to talk to us about energy risk and governance. So I'd like to please bring in Mr. Joachim Adenusi. Please, you have the floor. Thank you so much. And apologies for making you wait for so long.
Okay, moderator, sorry. Just to inform,
yes.
I will be shutting down in the next 3 to 5 minutes because the big man is calling. So if I disappear in the next 5 minutes, that I'm out. Thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Uncle George. Thank you, Norbert, Charlotte, Dr. Abbas and co. Thank you very much. It was nice sharing the platform with all of you. I'll be in the next 3 to 4 minutes. So if I disappear, I know that I'm gone. Thank you.
Thank you so much. my VP, there's one question I would have liked.
Justice.
Yeah, I think justice would be good for that, and then maybe what's the other? Itomi, Uncle
Okay.
Itomi, if I may use Derek's Farker's terminology. I want the one question from one Ayo Adeni, I think, on I think it's got a lot to do with human capacity development and all that. Can we fish out that question? And
Please.
I may also have to be excused because I'm about to catch a flight. I've been in transit. And so you will need to round off for me with great thanks to these guys. I think we overloaded this seminar. It should have been a 3 OGTAN lecture series, but they're definitely going to come back because I know that from what we have seen, we have not exhausted what these guys have to offer, and it's quite enlightening. So if we can take that question, then you now go.
Okay.
I think that will help us. Yes,
okay,
please.
Mr. Apolabi, can I just say that apologies, I have a class to jump into. Apologies, that is academic life.
Okay.
But I'm
all right.
very happy to answer questions in the future, maybe by email.
Yeah,
Sure.
maybe we can also get these questions answered by each of our parties and then sent back to our we can put up this presentation on our website and the answers can be asked.
Very well
by
said,
all participants who
Mr.
wish to.
President.
Yes.
Yes, that's what we plan to. So let me go ahead to the question you referred to. That's the one from Ayo Adeni, right?
Ayo Adeni, yes, please. Thank you.
Okay, so here's his question. It says, a critical puzzle that's perceived is that it seems that gas stream has been conceived and developed in isolation. As a guide, none of the top performing economies rest GDP progressions on resources. Rather, they are more tied to service delivery capacities and technology. Awareness is steadily growing and momentum building on the gas revolution that is tinkering Nigeria's economy to harness huge benefits associated with gas harvesting and utilization. So to the question he asked actually is, what specific plans is the ministry making to engineer the development and sustained engagement of recognizable and sellable deep-end welding workforce with service access to national and regional economies?
Okay,
Yeah.
First off, the ministry is doing quite a lot, and if you've been following up, for those that have been following up, you will agree with us that the agencies in the ministry, the Petroleum Technology Development Fund, NNPC, local content, Nigerian Nuclear Regulatory Authority, PTI, all of these institutions and agencies in the Ministry of Petroleum Resources, if you look at their different deliverables, they have a handshake with industry. So there is that connectivity to addressing this question that is asked, and which is where even OGTAN, I believe, has some form of a partnership with the Nigerian Content and Development Monitoring Board. The other bit I would like to equally mention is that, again, as a nation, if you recall recently, the Ministry of Science and Technology name changed. It changed from Ministry of Science and Technology to Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation. Now, innovation to do what? Innovation in the sense that, like I did mention in my statement, during my presentation, digital age has come to stay. And if you look at what is obtainable in oil and gas industry, which again, most of the oil majors and indigenous oil companies as well, including NNPC, they're trying to upskill their digital competency of the personnel. And so in the ministry, we are actually doing the same through local content and of course the PTDF. Now on the private sector level, yes, most companies are doing the same thing. So out there in the public domain, there are a lot of opportunities that people can latch on to address this question. I don't know if that will help.
Okay, thank you, Engineer Justice. I'd like to ask if Mr. Itomi has anything to add to that.
Not much more than I have added before. Like I told you, it's just a question of rising up to the challenge of the opportunities that are obviously opening up. I know it that this one commodity we've depended on for so long is about to be out-fashioned. And hey, the worry is, where do we go from here? But I always fall back to history. I have seen a country where, as I told you, banking was what it was. But look at what it is today. Some of the best bankers in the world are Nigerians. Look at telecom, 700,000 lines, out of which only 400,000 were functional. We opened up the sector. Nigerians rose up to the challenge. Today we have a penetration of close to 200 million. And look at the jobs and other opportunities that have been created. Look at what fintech is doing. I agree completely with you that having been dependent so much on exporting primary products and then develop an appetite for importing finished products, we've become a bit lazy. The richest nations are not necessarily primary product exporters. So that is where we should be moving to. And trust me, we have the brain power in Nigeria. We can rise up to the challenge. We can work the industry based on the incentives in the PIA to meet with our domestic needs. We can produce our oil and our gas for domestic consumption, and then just depend so little on what we export. If we refocus ourselves, we cannot be debating this topic as though all we're going to produce natural gas for is for export. All we're going to produce whatever is for export. Or even the renewables, it should just be a catalyst to diversify the economy and then just unleash this young, vibrant population that we have. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Very well said. Very quickly, Mr. Joachim, would you please take the floor and talk to us about energy risk and governance? Mr. Joachim? Mr. Joachim, are you there? Okay. Okay. He's not ready for us. Let's just go ahead and move to the next item on our agenda. We're coming to a close right now. Norbert, could you please give up the screen so we can share the next information that we have?
Sorry, I forgot my stuff was on.
Your screen is so David, could you please put up the screen? Well, we just want to show you some of the programs that we have on offer. These programs are actually being done in collaboration with OGTAN. They're training programs for the energy industry, oil and gas, renewables, power, and manufacturing sector from ETC. David, please go to the particular list of trainings that we have available in collaboration with OGTAN. We're able to deliver all of these trainings. Some of the speakers that you have heard today deliver this training where you have in-depth knowledge of some of the issues that they have raised. Gas market analysis and pricing, gas market and business analysis, industry practice on gas operations, data management, gas pipeline design and analysis, gas pipeline network analysis, enablers for optimal gas utilization, critical thinking, the Nigerian gas transportation network code, and so on and so forth. One of the best-selling ones is the how to start an LPG gas retail business in Nigeria, where some of our facilitators even help with further consultancy to help those who are interested in investing in the gas value chain to develop the concept node feasibility studies and through project management and executions, understanding autogas. So these are all available, and we do this in partnership with some of our speakers who have spoken very well today, and OGTAN. So having said that, I'd like to give an opportunity once more to Mr. Joachim. Are you ready for us now? Before we bring this to a close. Okay, Mr. Joachim is not there. So I'd like to ask the OGTAN president to please bring us to a close by sharing his closing remarks, if he's available. Are you still with us?
Yeah, I'm still with you partially. Let me see what I can do. I was about to shut down and board my flight, but let me quickly. Okay, I want to thank everyone for your participation. I want to thank our panelists. It's been a great time. It's been wonderful. I wanted to do a little recap of what we have learned so far from all our panelists, but time is no longer on our side. But can I assure you that OGTAN has heard you loud and clear. The entire industry has heard you. But the charge to OGTAN to do the much we can to ensure that there are sector ready and sector relevant trainings for the industry. All that is taken into our stand. We are ready to roll, and we are also already standardizing our protocols and processes to ensure that what we come out with at the end of the day will just be what the industry needs to make our gas decade a reality for Nigerians. Because at the end of the day, if this does not trickle down to the common man, then sorry, it doesn't make any change, because if it does not affect someone's gari and bread or butter, then it's still all jojo and all talks and not walking the talk. So I want to thank all of you for how you have helped us to understand more what we need to do to make this a reality for Nigerians. And I want to assure you that OGTAN will do its best to ensure that we are ready to roll, ready to partner with all who are ready to work with us to make this a reality for Nigerians. Thank you very much to Lady Charlotte. Thank you to Justice. Thank you to Uncle Itomi, Charles, the other guys. Can't remember the names now. Thank you very much. Dr. Abbas, who has left, and my friend Norbert is that surname sounds a little bit on Nigerian. I don't know, but I think
it is very Nigerian, trust me.
So I know from the in-depth analysis and statistical data we are given that he understands our language and our method completely. So I want to thank you for what you have done. I overheard you saying something about the trainings that you do in the light of what you have just done for us. Are you an OGTAN member company yet? If you are not, I think you need to come in closer with us so that we can help to market this great knowledge that you have. And I want to say that we're going to call most, if not all of you, back again on a different platform, because I think we overloaded this session. There's so much information that we took in one swoop, which we should have shared in little bits. That's how you eat an elephant meat, for easier digestion. So I'm looking at us doing this again. And I also know that our audience were very much enthused by what we have put together. So thank you all. God bless you. And please do keep safe.
Yes, thank you, the OGTAN president. He's already thanked all of our panelists who were excellent, and we appreciate you all. I want to thank my co-moderator, Kinyovo, who is the managing partner of Cosmos. I don't want to mispronounce it, so I'll just let you say the last words, Kinyovo.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Falabi. So I want to thank everyone, our panelists, our very power-packed panelists. We promised it was going to be power-packed, and indeed it was. And all our attendees who have stayed for the entire duration of this lecture series. We're very grateful. I'm Imokino Dafiakpede from Campus Mentis Legal Practitioners, and please do have a wonderful day and do come back next time for the next training session. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you all. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye, everyone.